And I tell you first that it's a pleasure to welcome all of you on this online event with about the hurdle the firms which are fighting global warming have to face today. I am pleased that once again, this seminar is co-organized by the Chinese International Finance Forum, with whom the task force has had a long-lasting cooperation on this issue of climate change. And I thank again on this occasion the excellent relations we have been cultivating with Joanna Zhuang, its Deputy Secretary General. And the Institute for Governance and Sustainable Development, chaired by Verwoerd Zijk, with whom the task force is now accustomed to work as well. And thanks, my dear Verwoerd, for your understanding and sharing of what we have been doing. You have always answered present whenever I ask you to participate to the event I've been organizing. I repeat it. The subject we'll deal with over the next 3 hours is, in my view, topical and important. It is clear now that there are many forces, whether political or coming from the firms and financial companies, which are backtracking in the fight for climate. This is really a problem since we all know evolution of temperature all over the world is extremely worrying. We should not decelerate, but on the contrary, accelerate in the fight against global warming. In public opinions, polls are showing that this fight for climate is no more a priority in many places. The task force, together with its Chinese and American colleagues, is looking at the incentive which should be introduced in order for this fight to be at the pace which corresponds to its primary goal, which is a reduction in GHG emissions, contrary to the trend, which actually is still on the rise every year. In order to cope with this issue, we look at some firms in different sectors which are still anxious to comply with their moral obligation vis-à-vis the future of our planet. We have chosen 3 domains which are topical in this respect: renewables is key, fossil fuels, which is key as well, and green hydrogen. After a general presentation, the floor will be given to firms which are at the forefront of the fight for climate in each of these topics. Introductory presentation will be made for our seminar by Philippe Varin, the chair of International Chamber of Commerce. Again, many thanks to all of those who have helped us organize this event, the firms which have accepted to speak, and the representatives of important international institutions. And I do not forget the participation of major actors and think tanks which are present today with us. Now I give the floor to Zhu Xiang, IFF Executive Vice President and former Vice President of the World Bank.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Alfondre, who is also the Vice Chairman of the International Finance Forum. It's my pleasure to join this meeting with my colleagues from IFF. After several years of steady progress in containing the climate crisis, reversing environmental degradation, and realizing the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, various obstacles that have emerged this year now threaten to not only arrest, but also to reverse these advances. For most among the setbacks on the path to a cleaner, greener, and fairer world was the second time withdrawal from Paris climate agreement by US administration. That actually is a threat to the efforts by the rest of the world in the fight against the climate change. The way to victory lies not in regarding such antithetical figureheads as a man to be vanished. They are, after all, mere ephemeral, but as a negative factors to be included in our calculus and regated by the irreversible forces of the plain logic, sheer determination, and historical inevitability. Notwithstanding these adverse developments, many firms all over the world are still steadfastly discharging their obligations to safeguard our Earth for future generations. These others of us who remain committed to bequeathing to our progeny a habitable planet, one those human inhabitants enjoy universal equality, opportunity, and prosperity, must now gird ourselves to redouble the fight, remaining undaunted and even more resolute in the face of this nascent adversity, since, as is axiomatic, there's no plan B. It's our pleasure to jointly convene this meeting with the Task Force on Carbon Pricing in Europe and the Institute for Governance and Sustainable Development. Following the meeting we co-hosted last April, our focus on this occasion, we turn to renewable energy, green hydrogen, and the fossil fuel. We also have the pleasure of having representatives of enterprises at the forefront of climate action who are delivering special addresses today. We are keenly anticipating the keynote speech of Philippe Varin, President of International Chamber of Commerce, who has graciously consented to favor us with a summary of global companies' actions to counter the climate change. Last but not least, I would like to thank all the participants and audiences for taking the time from your busy rounds to attend the meeting today. Your presence is a strong testament to your unwavering commitment to leaving a happy, healthy, and safe environment to our great grandchildren and theirs. I wish you all the great success. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Xiang. It was a very strong introduction, and I think that it deserves to be welcome. Please, Sherwood, it's your time.
Thank you. I like to start off with a reminder of the climate emergency. And this is as much a scientific question as it is a communications question. How do we get this across to the citizens of the world so that climate change moves up the political agenda from where it is today? And the emergency can be described in three simple concepts of temperature, time, and tipping points. It's too hot today, 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial level, on the way to 2 degrees, perhaps by the end of a decade. And the time is too short before we start hitting the first 5 irreversible tipping points that are between the 1.5 of today and the 2 degrees of tomorrow. This includes shutting down the Atlantic overturning circulation. AMOC, the most recent data on that, shows that maybe we could shut that down in 20 to 30 years. This would be a disaster for the world. And it's only one of the 5 tipping points that we face when we pass the 1.5 barrier on a permanent basis. The rate of warming is increasing as well. This is particularly troubling because it's worse today than it was yesterday, and it's going to be worse again tomorrow. So this is from the continuing emissions, of course, but it's also from the unmasking of existing warming that we expose or unmask when we clean up air pollution, as we are doing by taking the sulfates out of the shipping fuel, that is actually adding warming. There's about a half a degree Celsius already in the climate system. And as we clean up air pollution, we unmask that and add it to the current warming. So we need speed with our solutions, and we'll talk about that today. And we need to decarbonize as fast as we possibly can. But that's a marathon, takes us time, and it only turns temperature down a modest amount at 2050, a tenth of a degree. Because when you decarbonize the first decade, you actually add a bit of warming because you're reducing the co-emitted cooling sulfates, and they fall out very quickly and unmask existing warming. So you have to do the other fast half of climate, and that's the super pollutant side: methane, tropospheric ozone, black carbon soot, and the hydrofluorocarbon refrigerants. You can cut those right now with known technologies, often existing governance approaches, and you can get 4 times more avoided warming in the near term. And methane is the biggest piece right now. So methane, I hope we get a chance to talk about further. If you cut methane following the global methane pledge that now more than 160 countries have supported, you can avoid 0.3 degrees Celsius by the 2040s. That makes that the single biggest, fastest bite out of the climate problem, the climate emergency brake that we need to pull immediately. So that's some good news, and I hope we get to talk about it further during this discussion. Thank you, Edmond, and back to you.
Thank you, Dawood. Thank you for introducing methane, because we already, many people attending this event know it. We already had an event focused on methane. We will come back on methane, I hope, with Julien Perez. I hope we will be able to attract the main firms in the world who will tell us what they did since 2 or 3 years when we started to deal with methane. All together, Julien, we'll do it. We'll try to attract them and listen to them, because I share what Dawood said. We have this example of the Montreal Protocol. The Montreal Protocol is a fantastic venture, fantastic. When you remember that all the firms that were emitting gas, which were destroying the ozone layer with fantastic impact, negative impact, they decided to reduce and even stop their emissions of these gases, and it succeeded. It succeeded. Why don't we find a way for methane with the same result? I must say that it took 30 years or 40 years for this outcome for the ozone layer. But anyhow, this proves that if there is willingness all around the world for an objective, and with the firms, without the firms we can do nothing. I have been in politics. I know that politicians believe that they are very powerful. Okay, sometimes. But firms are at the heart of the fight against global warming. Now, I give the floor to Philippe Varin. Philippe.
Thank you, Edmond, for the opportunity to address you today on behalf of the International Chamber of Commerce, the institutional representative of over 45 million companies in more than 170 countries. We gather, thanks to you, and more at a complex moment for the global climate agenda. It has just been reminded to us. Political winds are shifting. Commitments made in Paris 10 years ago are now being tested, not only by geopolitical instability, but by domestic pressures in many economies. And with the recent decision by the United States to withdraw once again from the Paris Agreement, some may be asking, and you do, will business begin to pull back too? The answer, emphatically, is no. And why? Now, one, business is acting, even if talking less. There are undoubtedly being a change in tone. Companies are speaking less frequently and with less, we say, fanfare about their climate efforts. Now, that reflects the political environment in some jurisdictions, especially, but it doesn't signal a reversal of ambition. If anything, what we are witnessing now is a transition from climate communication, say, to climate execution. And the data supports this. The WBCSD Climate Investment Barometer, which was just published this week, shows that companies are continuing to ramp up green investments. Over 80% of surveyed firms report maintaining or increasing climate-related capital expenditures compared to 2023. And importantly, this includes firms' headquarters in countries where climate policy has come under political pressure. In other words, while the rhetoric may be quieter, the resolve is undiminished. But, and this is a crucial point, sustained business action requires, and I would say, enabling policy environments. And here, we are seeing growing misalignments. Indeed, what business needs now is policy backing, not policy drive. We must be clear, private capital alone cannot deliver the transition at the pace and scale required. The business community remains committed, but we need governments to hold up their ends of the bargain. That means sustained political commitments, yes, but it also means a serious effort to remove the structural and regulatory barriers that are making climate action harder and more expensive than it needs to be. And let me be specific here, because this is not just a general call for ambition. There are 4 clear, specific areas for us where policy reform is urgently needed to unlock private investments in climate solutions. So these 4 priorities for reform to enable climate investments are, first, scaling up high-integrity voluntary carbon markets. Voluntary carbon markets are not a silver bullet, but they are a vital financing tool, especially in sectors and geographies where abatement is hard or capital is scarce. Yet confidence in these markets has been shaken. We need to restore trust, not through over-regulation or shutdowns, but by improving the quality, transparency, and governance of credits. Initiatives like the ICVCM on the supply side of carbon sinks and the VCM on the demand side from corporates are essential steps. But we now need governments to provide clear signals that carbon markets are a legitimate and supported part of the climate finance landscape. Carbon markets can mobilize billions, but only if confidence is restored and demand is unlocked. And now we are working with a number of governments to this end as part of a coalition launched this week with leadership from the UK, Singapore, and Kenya. We are also working with a range of partners to standardize practice in the voluntary markets, leveraging our ICC standard setting expertise. This is one point. The second one is reforming Basel III regulation to enable green lending in emerging markets. Today, capital adequacy rules under Basel III severely limits the ability of banks to finance projects in emerging markets, even those projects when they are backed by credible guarantees or insurance. The problem is that current rules often fail to recognize these credits risk mitigants, and they treat them as if they offer no protection. So this results in disproportionately high capital charges on otherwise sound loans, making sustainable infrastructure and climate projects financially unviable for many banks. We are not calling for Basel III to be abandoned. We are calling for sensible reform to better reflect actual risk, acknowledge guarantees from reputable institutions, and align prudential regulation with global developments and climate goals. The third piece now is about getting multilateral development banks to take more risks. Let me blunt. The MDB model, as it currently functions, is not fit for purpose in the climate era. The problem is not a lack of mandates, it's a lack of risk appetite. MDBs must move beyond conservative lending models. They must start using their balance sheets more boldly as catalysts for private investments. That means greater use of equity, more early stage grant funding, and above all, a willingness to take first loss positions in climate projects to crowd in private capital. The capital is there. What's missing is a risk intermediation function, and MDBs are the institutions best placed to fill that gap. And I can tell you, I was discussing yesterday with Ajay Banga, the chair of the World Bank in Paris, which is absolutely on the same wavelength. Number 4, we must ensure that trade policy supports green technology diffusion. We need to make sure that global trade rules enable, not hinder, the transition to a low carbon economy. Right now, we are seeing worrying signs of fragmentation, tariff hikes on solar components, export restrictions on critical materials, and industrial policies that create silos instead of supply chains. We cannot solve a global problem with fragmented solutions. Clean technology must move freely across borders, and that means that making trade policy a central part of the climate agenda. Removing tariff and non-tariff barriers to climate technology should be a priority for WTO members. For ICC, obviously, it's not a footnote. Finally, the road to Belém. COP30 is a milestone because it's a milestone moment 10 years on from Paris. We have a chance not just to recommit, but to course correct. The science is clear. The investment case is clear. What's needed now is policy alignment and political courage. The private sector is still at the table, but we need governments, all governments, to meet us there, not with declarations, but with decisions capable of catalyzing action. So let COP30 be remembered not for what was said, but for what was done to unlock the trillions needed for a resilient decarbonized global economy. We will be working extensively in the months ahead on the issues I just mentioned, and I invite all of you that want to join with us in this effort. As part of our global campaign that we call the opportunity of a lifetime, to ensure this is a COP that truly delivers for the real economy and our planet. Thank you very much. And perhaps, Andrew, should we have a 1 minute
Please.
video?
Yeah,
1
please.
minute.
Please.
And more?
Yeah, please.
Philippe, I think the organizers have arranged to play it.
Super.
Some see it as too late, too hard, too risky. To some, it's a myth. Some don't see it at all. Since when has that stopped us? Seeing these challenges differently is what business is all about. Turning friction into momentum, pressure into possibilities. Seeing a world hungry for solutions no one saw coming. Climate change is the defining test of our time and for the lifetimes that follow us. Let's not look away when the world needs business most, because this is our greatest chance to reimagine how things work. Cleaner, smarter, resilient, stronger. It's not impossible. It's the opportunity of a lifetime.
Excellent, 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 excellent. Thank you, Philippe. Excellent, excellent presentation and excellent film. We all the participants are well aware that this is a very important moment for mankind, for life on Earth. If we don't succeed to convince the people, because everything is conviction of the people, it is at the heart of the problem. I've been a politician for so many times. We cannot do things against the will of the people. If we don't convince the people that it is the last chance we have to save the planet of disaster, then we are heading towards something which generations to come will never forgive us. You said something which is, in my view, extremely important, Philippe, among many things you said, which I share, obviously. It is trade. Trade, and you have to convince the people, by the way, because it's a political problem. Actually, it's so easy to say we have to protect ourselves against the competition of China, by the way, because China is doing a very important investment in renewables in the first place, which is a good thing for humanity, a good thing. And what we are saying, okay, and electrical vehicle and so on, we have to protect ourselves against the competition. But trade, free trade, is a boon to protect the environment, to protect us against climate change. Why? Because it forces us to do the same. Why prevent Europe from importing electrical vehicle from China? We just have to. You have been in the car industry, Philippe, and I should say you sent one major firm in France a few years ago. So we have to fight. This is competition. Competition is good when it leads to saving the planet. And so we have to be very careful not to endorse positions, because we are very short-sighted that lead to positions which are contrary to fight against climate change. So now I give the floor to Paolo Frankel for the part one on renewables in the world. Where do we stand? Paolo Frankel is the head of the Renewable Energy Division at the International Energy Agency. And I take the benefit of having the floor to tell Paolo that I am an admirer of what the International Energy Agency is doing. This is unbelievable. The amount of work and the quality of research they have been doing over the years. And I would like that everybody follow their advices. Paulo, you have the floor.
Thank you so much for this very kind introduction, Edmond, and I hope that you all hear me well. And now I'm trying also to share my slides. Please confirm that you can see them in the right way. Is that okay?
Yes.
Excellent. So in the next 12 minutes or so, I would like to give nonetheless a positive message on renewables. It's true that we are in a very complex geopolitical situation with high uncertainties. It is true that there is a kind of climate fatigue in many stakeholders. But it is also true that there are true opportunities, and this coming because two things are strong: the fundamentals of renewables and other drivers for policies that are not just climate, but also other benefits, either economic or energy security. Let me start with something bigger than renewables, which is electricity. Why electricity? Because electricity is the real driver of economic growth in many countries, and it also is a main driver for decoupling economic growth from emission. And for instance, just in 2024, we saw electricity demand growing more than 4%, which is more than the GDP and the double than total energy demand. And this has a consequence of really driving many different technologies of energies, and in particular renewables. And I will focus in renewables in the next minutes. So if we look at the recent trends of renewables, they're really impressive. In 2024, according to our numbers, the world installed 700 gigawatt of renewables installation. This is enough to cover the whole demand of a country like Japan, between 900 and 1,000 terawatt-hours. This is the double of the capacity addition of just 2 years ago and 3 times 6 years ago. It's a phenomenal increase, which is mainly driven by solar PV and mainly by China, I have to add. And this in our forecast is going to continue in the next years, despite the headwinds that some of these technologies and some policies in some countries have now. We see more than 5,500 gigawatt of being installed between 2024 and 2030. This will lead somehow to compared to the tripling targets, it will lead us to 2.7. It is still not the whole thing is done, but the big chunk of it. And once again, this is dominated by solar PV for very simple reasons: declining cost, shorter permitting timelines, more widespread social acceptance, and in particular also distributed applications growing much more. There are challenges as well, and I will speak about a few of them, but this is something that will continue to expand enormously given the incredible level of improvement in this sector reached in particular in solar. Wind is following, not at the same pace. In some countries, and in particular in OECD countries, the wind industry is suffering, but nonetheless, this is still the second most important. And then it is important to also foster all low carbon power electricity technologies, including nuclear, including whatever we know that brings to dispatchable power and low carbon emissions. Now, in terms of geographical distribution, the role of China is just amazing. In 2030, I'm speaking now of total renewable capacity, which will be close to 10,000 gigawatts. Every second gigawatt will be in China. I repeat, by 2030, according to our numbers, we see every second gigawatt of renewables installed in China by 2030. So overall, China will install some 3,000 of gigawatts in the future time. And these are the other growth rates that we see in other parts. Now, some of those will be revised, and I cannot hide they will be revised down because of recent political changes in some countries. But I would stress a few things. The drivers in the European Union for renewables is not just climate. It is, first of all, energy diversification and energy security. And this continues to hold every day. The driver in India is a growing electricity demand. And actually, India is the country in the world where renewables will grow faster in percentage terms. And then I would like to raise your attention on the last column in the right, Sub-Saharan Africa, which is actually will grow 4 times faster than now, despite at lower levels. I would just remind one number for your attention. The total cumulative capacity of solar in Africa now is lower than the capacity of solar in the Netherlands. I'm sure you will argue with me that there's something wrong. And the something wrong is actually what Philippe said, which is financing in emerging and developing economies. But it's certainly not the solar potential nor the possibility to install solar in these countries. So when we compare the different parts of electricity in 2035, and this is our main forecast, it's just the steps scenario of the wheel, we will see something fundamental, which is renewables overtaking all the others. Already this year, the totality of renewables will overpass coal and become the number one in electricity generation. But by 2035, solar PV will be by far the largest generation in the world, and followed by wind and then all the others. Now, coming to a few challenges, or at least things that are in the negative narrative of these days. In many countries, and in particular in Europe, there is a tendency to say, oh, but the renewables are expensive. You see that renewables are inducing high prices, or high electricity transition is inducing high prices. So let's be a bit factual on a few things. When it comes to wholesale prices, the prices crisis in Europe in particular is a gas price crisis. And even with larger fraction of renewables in the mix, this is not enough to counteract. Just a couple of examples. Germany has only 15% of gas in their mix, but gas sets the price for 5,500 hours. And we have an issue with the market design in this respect. So one thing is a fact that when it comes to wholesale prices, more renewables are bringing wholesale prices down, and more gas dependency are taking the gas prices up. And I'm afraid we will see another gas price spike very soon in the coming weeks with new ones. A different story is what is the final price of electricity, which depends on many factors, and some things are a bit ambiguous in different countries. One thing that is also mentioned many times is the problem of the challenge of intermittent, we prefer to say variable renewables in the grid. Now, the IEA has a long-standing experience of looking at this for more than 15 years now. And we have invented a methodology that looks at different phases of different challenges of system integration. In a nutshell, the integration challenge depends on two variables, not just one. One is the share of variable renewables themselves, and the second is the flexibility of the total power system where they are integrated. The fact that Denmark can have almost 90% of renewables in their grid is the fact that it's a small country, very good grids, very good interconnections, interconnected with the rest of Europe. Ireland and Spain are much more complicated because they are an electric island. But the message here is that in the lower phases, and there are many, the majority of these countries, this integration can be addressed with existing power systems. And while going to higher phases, it requires more flexibility resources of four types: grids and interconnections, affordable storage, third, dispatchable low emission supply, and fourth, demand side. So storage, we have an incredible good news in battery cost decrease, which is coming from vehicles, but then has spillovers in stationary batteries. And on the right, you see the LCOEs of solar PV and storage, which is a completely different value to the power systems than solar PV alone in several countries. And once again, I wish to repeat that solar and wind are among the cheapest options of any other type of electricity generation in other parts of the world. But one part is tricky. There are more, but one I would like to focus is the investments and the velocity of investments in grids. Grids and interconnections must be expanded and strengthened much more than has happened until now, not just for renewables, but also for electrification of end uses, for electric vehicles, for heat pumps, and not mentioning for artificial intelligence. Without a massive effort in grids and interconnection, this will be the major bottleneck. And as Philippe mentioned before, this bottleneck is even stronger in emerging and developing countries where there are weak grids and there are difficulties to have financing tools. So in the end, I was also asked, how do we look at the tripling targets? We're not that bad. According to these forecasts in the main case, which is our central case, we would be at 2.7 times the 2022 capacity compared to the target of the tripling. Now, our main point is that with better policies, we would be in what we call an accelerated case, and then we would get closer to the tripling. So what are these policies? I don't have the time to go in detail, but what I would mention, and thank you, Edmond, for quoting in the background our COP28 paper of last year, we looked at different clusters of countries, which very much depend on what situation you are in. So, for instance, the cluster 3 are the ASEAN countries where there is a big current fossil fuel overcapacity, and the actual problem is how to get rid of this young fossil fuel fleet. I don't have the time to go into details. I just want to tell you that this analysis exists, and we know pretty well what kind of policies we would need where. One thing, I want to echo what Philippe said, we need to fight policy uncertainty. Policy uncertainty is the biggest enemy of business. And actually, we need policy backing, a long-term vision, not necessarily economic incentives anymore, but a general policy backing. And this is an issue in a number of countries right now. I wish to conclude with one aspect, which is often forgotten. For our energy security summit that we held in London 2 months ago, we made an analysis for the first time. We calculated the impact of what renewables have already done from 2018 to now in diminishing the import dependency of fossil fuels and therefore in augmenting the energy security. It is massive. It's enormous. And it is something that we tend not to speak enough about. This will continue. This has huge economic benefits, but also geopolitical benefits. And this is why I want to conclude with an optimism on renewables. Despite all the difficulties, they are very strong drivers in terms of economics and in terms of energy security that also hold for the climate skeptics. You may have noted that I rarely mentioned the word climate in my presentation, not because renewables do not help, but it was deliberate to say they bring multiple benefits. And this is why we keep optimistic even in these complex times. I hope this can trigger some discussion in the coming hour. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Paulo. Very, very useful presentation. Very, very useful. One of them is important and underestimated. It is the importance of interconnections in the energy sector, all the energy sources. I mean, all energy sources, and all around the world, to create, I should say, as much as we can, a world market for energy. A world market for energy, at least for Europe. A few years ago, I think 5 or 6 years ago, before I created this task force, I made a report to the European Commission. And the theme was very simple: how to enhance the investments in interconnection in the energy sector. And I make recommendations, and obviously I failed to convince, even though they were very happy with my report, which I did with many CEOs from the finance and the energy sectors. But probably because my first recommendation was a significant price of carbon. And at that time, the European Commission was not convinced. It is now convinced that it is very important. You cannot imagine the bottlenecks it creates to have these fragmented markets of energy and even source of energy in a common market, in the market in the European Union, which is supposed to be a common market, a union market. This is very, very troublesome and very detrimental to the fight against global warming. The first investment that the public authorities should make at European level is to help fund the necessary amounts, which are huge, by the way, in order to create a real real interconnections and create a real energy market in Europe. And I must say that in the rest of the world as well, but that is much more complicated. But it's the only way, in my view, to avoid that some countries, I don't quote any of them, but benefit from the fact that they are relatively isolated to still use extensively coal, for example, which is not on the way of its disappearance. Now we start with the first session on renewables, and we'll give the floor to firms. The first one, will be Iberdrola, Marta Martinez Sanchez. By the way, Marta is a member of the board since its beginning of the task force, and she is the head of analysis and special project, climate change and alliances at Iberdrola. Marta, you have the floor.
Thank you, and hello everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to join this very interesting discussion. Some of the things have come up already. I'll just give the view from Iberdrola's side, and as a private sector company. You mentioned it earlier a little bit, Edmond. We are a power utility. We're originally from Spain, but we have a global footprint, and we cover activities in the power sector across all the value chain, from generation, distribution to the retail business. We have now about slightly less than 60 gigawatts installed, and 90% of them are emissions free. And we've been investing in the energy transition for the last 30 years. We've shifted our mix and our strategy towards renewables, storage, and networks. And I think, and it leads in well with Paolo's presentation, over this time we have seen how the technological revolution has really enabled decarbonization to happen, and it has allowed decarbonization to happen in the electricity sector on the generation side. So we're now, but we're seeing it also happening in the demand side more gradually, which is really a really positive sign, because we need decarbonization to be competitive, and technology is doing its part. So we are seeing how in mobility, we have now clear cases where electric vehicles are competitive, or even more competitive than conventional ones. In heat pumps are another clear example. And we're seeing these cases and how technology is expanding in harder to abate processes. No, we just had we're working really close with the industry right now to really understand where they are, where the barriers are to decarbonize their processes. In this case, in particular, we had an event on heat for the ceramic sector in the east side of Spain, which is a region where all these these companies are concentrated, and they already had experienced at a not fully commercial level, but it was quite a big electric furnace for ceramic firing, which is one of the large temperatures, hard to abate sectors. And there's already experiences there, companies that are installing and committing to this technology. So it's still promising on harder to abate larger temperatures, not just the lower temperatures one, no? And also in now cases with thermal storage. So I think this positive story where technology helps decarbonization is going on. We're really in an era where electrification, and we have available technologies to implement and to accomplish a lot of the decarbonization that needs to happen. And so this is good for climate, but what we are seeing here, and the concerns have, back to the trilemma, where the economic impact is just as important as also environment, where energy security is a concern. So I think the energy in this context, the energy transition keeps on being the solution. No? And I think that making it or having the policies in place so that we can have decarbonization alongside with competitive industrialization and growth, that makes sense today. No, I think the EU has been very clear with the Clean Industrial Deal that will set up the growth strategy aligning decarbonization with new industries coming up. And this is really where we stand. No, we see that so renewables are working well. Their case study is becoming stronger. We have also the business case on the demand side really becoming stronger, and we need in the middle the networks. No, it's been already pointed to that this is really key. They're the backbone to this new electrified economy, and I would highlight two things on what we need right now. Obviously, we need the policies, but I would stress that we need to address the infrastructure deployment and make sure that those policies allow it to happen at scale and speed. We need to work on the streamlining permitting. We need to work on anticipating the needs. We have many projects on the industry side that they would like to implement solutions and electrify their processes. But if we don't have the network already deployed on coming within very short periods of times, the window of opportunity and that decision will be taken. I mean, the infrastructure needs to meet the say decision timelines in industries, and I think that that is a key area. We need to work on the demand side and make sure that in parallel with having the renewables, we need to have the demand there. And so we need to enable or policies to enable more projects to come online. And that means incentivizing industrial value chains of all the equipment that's needed, creating the regulatory support to de-risk investments, and also to take into account that some of the changing from one energy vector like gas to another energy vector like electricity will entail additional sources of risk in an industry. No, so how do we hedge that? How do we help industries take those decisions? And maybe CCFDs are a solution there, or policies can help. And another thing is looking into existing regulation, and it's been addressed. Also, it's already been mentioned. We might have regulation in place that can act as a barrier. And I'm thinking of, for instance, there's some fiscal policies where that were set up a long time ago where energy vectors would not compete. But right now there are electrified solutions and maybe those fiscal structures, and we have the case here in Spain with the tax on economic activity, and that is driven by capacity installed or power capacity and not gas. So it can add distortion. So I think there's really a need there to revise regulations across the board and really make sure that they don't add additional barriers to this process. No, so to sum up, we're fully committed to this energy transition. I think it really and the fundamentals are becoming stronger. They're good. It's good from a climate perspective, but it is also good from the energy security side in this context we're in right now. Also for economic growth and industry, and new activity and employment. We think we have all the elements in place, but we really need to focus on having the policies, and also another very important piece is alliances. I think that collaboration across stakeholders really can make transformational changes coming through, whether it's shorter periods to have solutions to the market, or bringing in new perspectives and working all together to have this in place sooner. So I'll leave it here. Looking forward to discussion afterwards.
Thank you. Thank you, Marta. Thank you very much. It's important to stress that in this sector of renewables, like in all the sector, in the energy sectors, clean energy sectors, if we want to create a strong incentive for firms to go in this sector and to develop activities, they have to create value for them to make profits. They have to make profits. It's stupid to imagine that we will develop a sector which lose money every investment it is making. That is absurd. So that is one of the major lessons that we should explain to the people. The clean energy sector has to earn enough money, otherwise we won't succeed. Now we go to our friends of China, and the floor is to Chuan Lu. The board is in the board of director of Qin Group. He will explain us what Qin Group is. And thank you, Chuan, for being with us. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you for the invitation that I can join this fantastic discussion. So I will share my presentation. So I hope you can see my presentation.
Yeah, no problem.
As you just mentioned, we are a company from China, established in the year 1984. We are specialized in the renewable sector. And by providing such as solar module inverters, BESS systems, and also as well as electrical equipment such as transformer, switchgear, cables. So basically, we can provide a full solution for solar park. So that's what we were doing. So today, I want to share what we have explored and practiced for the sustainable development on the China's dual carbon commitment. So it will be 3 parts. I will go it very quick. So I think, as you all know, that China government made the commitment for the dual carbon. Our President Xi announced in the during the 75th United Nations General Assembly the goal of carbon peaking before 2030, and also the carbon neutrality before 2060. So after that, actually, China faced a fantastic growth with the renewables. I mean, of course, before that, we had done pretty good job as well. But in recent 3-4 years, it's obviously accelerated. So as a company in this sector, I just want to show what we have done in this sector. So for the utility scale projects, I think China is quite unique because we have such a huge population, and many of the lands is quite desertificated. So there's not much agricultural land in China. So basically, we develop our own PV plus model. So how to convey those deserts, tidal flats, and the barren land into a PV like sites. So on the left, you can see it's exactly in a desert called Kubuchi Desert, which was the 7th largest desert in the world. It's located in Inner Mongolia province in China. And we did some treatment on the surface and build this tracking system with the solar. And this was like 310 megawatts project connected, I think, in the year 2016. And it won several awards. So in China, it was the first PV plus combat desertification project. And also it recognized by UNCCD in the year 2020, and also UNIDO in 2021. And then on the right, you can see we convert different type of desert land into a solar parks. So actually, this is pretty normal in China that had to utilize this type of land. This is for utility scale. And for distributed area, We are also the largest residential project developer, solar project developer in China. You can see from the left two pictures. These are the villages that in villages, people stay in house, which they own the rooftop. So basically we develop our business there. So far we have constructed over 1.8 million residential PV. From this year, from January to end of May, actually we did a great job. We connected more than 9.5 gigawatts for residential only in China. And with this 1.8 million households, it provides 54 billion kilowatt hour of green electricity annually, and reduce 43.2 million tons of carbon emission every year. And especially for the earning with these households, we shared more than 640 million USD per year with the households from the power generation income. And this income sharing actually increased about 20-30% of those households' annual income. And we also create, because when we develop these projects, we need a local labor to do installation and to promote our system. So we created jobs, opportunities for over 200,000 people in those rural areas. And besides this residential, I mean, we also step out in Africa to support for some villagers with off-grid system. And on the right picture, this is a public building, which is a Hangzhou East Railway Station. This project was connected in the year 2015. By that time, it was the largest public building rooftop solar in Asia. So these are the practice in the residential. So this is show our global footprint. So besides in China, we also dedicate ourselves in the global renewable developments. So currently we have more than 8 gigawatts portfolio on the developments, and these blue color countries are where we now actively work with renewable developments. So this covers Europe, Asia, Oceania, Africa, and Latin America. And also we have an extensive track records of over 16 gigawatts complete projects overseas. These are the some of the project pictures, just show you the concept what we have done. So for this left up, Ban Ban, this is in Egypt, and the Winhao in Vietnam. Mid-Groningen, which when we developed this was the largest solar projects in Netherlands. It's 103 megawatts. And Sakaka is in Saudi, and Poland, Turkey. We cover many countries. We do developments, EPC solutions, and the O&M service, so cover the whole value chain. Besides project developments, I think China is a main manufacturing country for renewable products. So basically, we also do solar module and cell production. So our factory located in southeast China, a city called Yancheng, this was the first factory won the 2 Rhineland certificate for zero carbon factory in China. I mean, among all these Chinese manufacturing. And 1 year later, in the year 2024, we have our another factory won the same zero carbon factory certificate, which was located in northwest part of China. So our aim is to do certification for 8 factories, which we so far own, by 2028 with the zero carbon certification. Also, we are the electrical equipment provider. So not just for the factory, but for the single products, we also develop several environmental friendly technology. So for the power transformer, which now is quite limited supply among the world, as just the gentleman from IEA mentioned, Paulo mentioned that the grid developments now face some limits. So we are also a power transformer provider. So you can see this is 750 kV power transformer, which is I think now is one of the highest voltage. And previously, most of the power transformer oil type is using mineral oil. But now we developed the technology by using vegetable oil, which is much more environmental friendly. And also for our module, we have adopt the ZVV technology and also busbar-free cell design. By utilizing this technology, we can reduce silver paste consumption by 20%, which that means we consume less mineral, and also achieving lower energy use and carbon emission. So these are the technology example we have done. So luckily, by developing solar projects globally, and we also receive financing support, the green financing. So last year, 2024, we received the syndication, a green credit facility by 21 international banks, and as well as some domestic banks of China. So the financing, the number scale is about 600 million euros, which will support us to further develop projects globally. I think this, as I heard, this was last year's largest in Asia for a green credit facility. And besides, we also want to develop, because there's a lot of geopolitical issues, so we want to develop 100% transparent, traceable supply chain as well. So you can see we work with our core suppliers, which are 100%, to accept third-party due diligence audit and assessment in social and environmental standards. And we just make sure none of them involved in the conflict mineral procurement and use. And these core suppliers 100% reach ISO 45001 and the 14001 standards. So these are these supply chain efforts we have done. And for ESG, most of our member companies within renewable sector has announced our ESG report. This is just one of the example from our cell and module entity. So we have clearly listed our target with numbers, with clear paces to reach these environmental, social, and governance. So these are what we have achieved. But for something we want to explore, one is green methanol. So China, you may know that we can produce the lowest cost of electricity from renewable. So we pick northeastern region for green hydrogen. It's a combination with 300 megawatts wind plus 100 megawatt solar. So we have simulated the cost of electricity is about 2.5, between 2 to 2.5 cents per kilowatt hour, the pure renewable energy to do the green hydrogen by electrolyzer. Then we also capture the CO2 from the biomass factory. Then you get the green hydrogen plus green carbon. Then you produce the green methanol. But unfortunately, so far, even by utilizing such a low renewable electricity cost, the green methanol price is still like 2 to 2.5 times compared to the traditional one. So far, we foresee this is not that like competitive. This is why this project has been some delay due to the demanding issue. And for overseas, we also see there's a lot of weak grid and off-grid scenario. So this is a project in Turkey. So we supplied about 2.75 megawatt solar together with 5 megawatt hour storage. So this system replaced about the diesel gen for 65 oil crane electricity consumption. So that saved the owner about 1.8 million USD like diesel consumption cost. And the payback time for taking this system is only 1.8 year. So the customer is pretty happy by taking this renewable solution. So last part, I just want to go very quick. I want to introduce a little bit about our green energy ecosphere. So far we are a value chain player. So we so far shipped PV module over 130 gigawatts globally, cover 60 plus countries, and the O&M service contract for renewable plants over 80 gigawatts, and finish more than 180 1.8 million residential rooftops. And we also participate the minority investment for green silicon production, which in a province in China, 97% of electricity comes from renewable by hydro plus solar and wind. And our philosophy is like, we want to, as a manufacturing and a solution provider, we want to do from green to green. So we utilize green energy by producing green products, such as solar module, inverters, BESS, and also electrical equipments. Then our customer can utilize these products to produce further green energy. So it becomes a closed loop from green to green. So that's our philosophy. So thank you for listening and your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuan, and thank you for what you are doing. I think that you are really at the forefront of the fight against global warming, and congratulate you because you have been covered for years. Just one thing. I always thought that those countries who will take it in the future, because it will replace what the oil and gas is actually for many countries, because they will use these deserts to produce electricity in cheap through solar and in a vast quantity, and that is in my think a wealth. Now, can we dispatch your slides, Chuan? Is it possible to?
Yeah. Yes. I'm more than happy.
Thank you very much.
We
have a second speaker.
You're welcome.
China, and China deserves two speakers on renewables, by the way, since it is obviously the country in the world which has the most invested in renewables. So I give the floor to Tian Zi, General Manager of Management Center of Longyi. Just for 7 minutes. Please.
Okay.
Done.
Let me share my screen. Yeah. Okay. Can you see my screen now? Hello? Yes? Okay. Yes, thank you for invitation. It's my great honor to give you a short presentation about Longyi today on behalf of our colleagues. Today, the title of my presentation is Solar for Solar, and I will emphasize openness and innovation, promote climate action. And firstly, I will give you a very short introduction about Longyi. Longyi actually is focusing on monocrystalline silicon wafer manufacturing and also monocrystalline silicon cells and modules manufacturing. Also, we are focusing on distributed photovoltaic solutions and utility solutions, and we also provide hydrogen energy equipment solutions. And here I show you a global footprint across 160 countries of Longyi. Actually, we have production sites not only in China, but outside of China, for example, in Vietnam, Malaysia, and we also have a joint venture in the United States. In 2024, our wafer shipments was close to 110 gigawatt, and the cell module shipments was over 80 gigawatt. LONGi dedicates our about 6% revenue to R&D activities that yielding a lot of achievements. Actually, we are world record keeper for not only solar cell efficiency and 27.81%, and also we created a world record for silicon perovskite tandem cell and 34.85%. And during past 15 years, we created more than 3,000 patents, and we have more than 3,000 talented people for R&D activities. And we have a sustainable development philosophy, which is named LIGHT. L means lead, and we promote budget development of oneself, industry, and society with a core of lead. And for innovative, we provide product responsibility and technology innovation. And for green, we care climate action. And for environment management and also water utilization. For harmonious, we care employee well-being, industrial collaboration, and community improvement. T is for trustworthy, and we care social responsibility management, customer relations, and responsible supply chain. Actually, during last 7 years, we cited the procedures to train our suppliers to meet ESG standards. We also take climate change response strategy and actions. Firstly, we identify the impacts, risks, and opportunities. And we are focusing on green manufacturing and climate mitigation solutions. And the first lighthouse plus zero carbon factory in the photo industry actually was created by LONGi. And also we provide product carbon footprint certifications to our customers and society. And here I show you the first lighthouse plus zero carbon factory.
Sorry to interrupt. Dr. Xie, I think we're on the first page.
Yeah.
Could you please share the screen? Thank you. Sorry.
Can you see it now?
Oh no, we just the typo.
We see just the first slide.
Okay, great.
Yes, something wrong with this one maybe. Now, can you see the screen?
Yes, we can see the PDF action.
The number 6, right?
Yes.
Okay. So next page. So this is page 7. Can you see my screen, page 7?
No problem.
Okay. So let me give you an example about the first lighthouse zero carbon factory in the photovoltaic industry. And this lighthouse factory enhances energy efficiency. Actually, it helps us to save energy consumption per unit about 24.6%. also help to promote energy-saving renovation projects and help to accelerate energy structure upgrade. And then next page, I think this is a topic we want to emphasize today. Just now, I'm showing you what we have done. Actually, now that's for call for actions. Firstly, I have to emphasize that openness is a foundation of collective progress, and barriers fragment markets and stifle growth. Openness fuels efficiency and resilience. At LONGi, we have seen firsthand how global supply chains and cross-border R&D partnerships, like what we have done in Malaysia, in the United States, and in the Vietnam, helps to drive solar innovation and cost reductions. Therefore, we urge policymakers to establish a fast-track green permitting mechanism, align carbon policy cross sectors and borders, and also incentivize circular economy models, and so on. And also, we want to stress that actually sustainability is the non-negotiable imperative. Climate action is not a burden, absolutely, but economic opportunity. Solar power now is the cheapest energy in the history, can decarbonize industry, create jobs, and ensure energy securities. And LONGi's commitment to solar for solar aligns with this vision. We are investing in local manufacturing and grid modernization to make clean energy accessible. So also, we believe that innovation is the engine of tomorrow's economy. So for other stakeholders, we encourage them to enhance climate-aligned financing mechanisms, encourage public-private partnerships for large-scale decarbonization and infrastructure projects. So for private sectors, we want to have more incentives to let them commit to transparent ESG practices and cross-sectoral partnerships. And in the meantime, to disclose ESG performance in alignment with the global standards, and also set science-based climate targets and report progress regularly, and also embed ESG metrics into corporate strategy, governance, and supply chain management, like what we have done during past years. Also, finally, we encourage private sectors to engage in multi-stakeholder platforms to co-develop low-carbon solutions. So that's all what I want to share today. And thank you very much for your attention.
So the question, which is at the heart of this event, how to incentivize the firms for climate action. That is absolutely key. For the time being, we don't do enough, and the framework is not optimal. Now, we certainly not last, but certainly not least, the speaker for the US will be, and they are very honored to have Richard with us, Richard Duke, who is a former US State Department Deputy Special Envoy for Climate. So, Richard, you have the floor now, and thank you for being with us.
It's my pleasure. Great discussion so far, and I want to give a set of examples that back up a major claim, which is that as important as pricing mechanisms are to deploy renewables, and of course, carbon fees can be a huge driver of progress, but also reducing the cost of capital. These kinds of mechanisms are necessary, but they aren't sufficient in the power sector, given that we have these serious political economy problems that are specific to each country's context and often to each subnational government's context. And I want to just quickly make that argument, citing a few major country cases. So first, just to talk about the United States. And here I would say that we've been approaching the pace needed on renewables, but not yet there. And we've seen too much natural gas growth in parallel to rapid growth in renewables. We were up to 45 gigawatts of renewables last year. That's up nearly 50% from 2023. And we saw more than doubling of storage. So exciting progress and pace. But as has been noted already with the election of President Trump, the United States has regrettably left the Paris Agreement a second time. And more relevant to renewables, right now there is a epic legislative fight underway regarding the incentives for renewables in what's known as our Inflation Reduction Act legislation. I can report that already it is clear that geothermal and nuclear will continue to receive very strong support, and indeed even increased support is my prediction. And we will see those solutions likely accelerate, albeit from a very slow initial pace. Also, I will note that we will see carbon capture and storage continue to receive $85 a ton of incentive in the US system, probably indefinitely, and that may have some relevance in the power sector over time. But the fate of wind and solar in the US incentives is being debated in our legislature right now. And there's nuance to that, and I won't predict except to say that we'll likely see reductions in support. But we'll have to wait and see how the legislation unfolds. And I will also note that whatever the outcome on the wind and solar supports in the United States, there's a long, long tradition of extensions of these tax credits that are the main tool we use to incentivize renewables in the United States. So even if the time period for wind and solar supports is shortened considerably, they may well end up getting extended again in future years, as, by the way, happened under the first Trump administration. So we'll see. But the United States also is the first example of the political economy challenge that we face in renewables deployment. Because even with strong national policy in place, and we'll see how strong it is after this legislative fight unfolds, there are serious political economy barriers to renewables and excess focus on natural gas in some states where there is a broken political economy around decision-making by regulated utilities. And that's a theme I'll come back to in other countries as well. Moreover, as has been noted by Paolo and others, the siting and permitting challenge is severe in the United States and is a major constraint that needs to be addressed in addition to broader policies such as carbon pricing or incentives or other price-based mechanisms. You do need attention to those political economy barriers as well. China. Let me say a quick word about China. Much has already been said. The pace of renewables deployment in China is, of course, pace setting. It is absolutely extraordinary. over 350 gigawatts of renewables deployed last year. And as in the United States, storage more than doubled as well last year in China, which is exciting and compelling. I would note that the government accordingly hit its 2030 goal for renewables 6 years early in China. That is very impressive, but also I'll come back to that in a minute because I think one thing that we hope for, and I hope for this with all due humility as a U.S. citizen under a current political context that is very challenging on climate, we hope that China will move towards renewables goals and indeed nationally determined contribution goals that are better aligned with its actual intent and potential, because the world really needs that clear signaling from China right now of actual expected progress as opposed to targets that are, in some sense, far easier than the reality of what China can deliver and is delivering. I'll also note that in China, in parallel to all of this extraordinary renewables and storage progress, there is a warning sign, which is that China has also continued to build on the order of 40 gigawatts of new coal power plants every year over the last 5 years. And indeed, there's a similar amount in the pipeline for the next 5 years. And that's on top of about 1,300 gigawatts of coal power capacity already online. I say that as something to watch and worry about because I think it is an indicator of a type of political economy challenge within China. There were constraints on reliability of the grid in China in recent years related to coal fuel supply mispricing. And I think that has been used as a basis to overbuild coal capacity in China. And when you overbuild coal capacity, that can and may come in conflict, in tension with future renewables. Indeed, we see some indications of that already, where capacity payments right now, in many cases, only reward coal power and not storage, let alone giving due to renewables for the capacity value that renewables also offer. So something to watch there. And above all, something to hope for is that China will choose to, frankly, step into the void that the United States is leaving on global climate leadership and set a nationally determined contribution for 2035 that is aligned with what Chinese officials and technocrats know is possible and likely on emission reductions for 2035. And specifically, I think all indications are that China peaked last year, and every indication is that they're on pace to reduce emissions more than 20% by 2035 already. So the question is, can a target be put forward that would then guide 2 successive 5-year plans that showcases that leadership and motivates it further at a time when the world needs China's leadership to bolster the Paris Agreement and to continue all this progress. So we can hope for that. And I note that hope with all due humility, again, coming from a United States perspective. But we have seen China step up during the first Trump administration, setting their net zero before 2060 target back in 2020. So there's some basis for the hope. Very briefly, in India, I would just say that, of course, there's tremendous ambition on renewables in India, a 500 gigawatt 2030 goal that's been in place for some years. But India is falling far short of that goal or the pace required to hit that goal, largely because of these political economy challenges. They've got the competitive procurements really rolling for renewables, but siting and permitting challenges and other political economy barriers are stopping them from hitting the pace that they seek to deliver. I'll also just note that despite the desires of some of my friends in the G7 and otherwise decommissioning coal capacity in India is really not in prospect right now. There's too much load growth, too much need for electricity. So the opportunity and the imperative for India and many similar countries in the emerging economy world is to help those countries to hit their pace on renewables deployment to displace the coal electrons, but not to, and to power clean growth, but not really to jump all the way to decommissioning much needed capacity during this transition period. And then very briefly, just to note, reflecting on the last 4 years of effort by G7 partners and others to help emerging economies with the renewables imperative, I will say that I think we've seen through the challenges of the just energy transition partnerships in places like Indonesia that these political economy problems have to be tackled squarely to have success. Simply offering concessional finance is not enough if you have utility systems which are dominated by incumbent coal interests and where decision making is opaque and where there's literal subsidy, for example, in the case of Indonesia, through their domestic market obligation on the price of coal fuel. You can't win that on the basis of subsidy or incentive or lower cost finance alone. You have to squarely tackle the decision making in the sector in the country where you're trying to get renewables to deploy. We did see in the last 4 years a very good success in Egypt through what's called the Nexus of Water, Food, and Energy, where there was a partnership with European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, Europe, Germany, and the United States, that has allowed a substantial acceleration of renewables in Egypt. And indeed, they updated their NDC accordingly to pull forward their renewables goal by a full 5 years. With that pragmatic approach on the renewables deployment imperative, and really a lot of diplomacy to tackle the political economy challenge there as well. I'll also just note, since no one has mentioned it yet, and then I'll wrap up, that Pakistan raises an interesting example right now. We've seen 22 gigawatts of solar imported last year in Pakistan on a base of generation across all technologies of only 46 gigawatts. So just a massive amount of solar, largely for distributed application, and largely because of the very high cost of grid electricity and low reliability of grid electricity in Pakistan. So you do see a case where a country that has lots of political economy problems in the power sector, as long as they allow solar to come in, that can provide a backstop of sorts, and provide some real clean power success, even in a very challenging regulatory context. So look, just to wrap up, I think that we hope for a world that moves towards carbon pricing and rational trade, and that there's no doubt that as we move into the next decade, that will be important in order to hit the pace of progress we need on renewables and more broadly. But in all countries, we need to, in parallel, think through and really address the political economy barriers to renewables and more broadly clean power. In many contexts, that means directly engaging on regulated utilities investment decisions about clean power. But even in cases where that's been deregulated and where you have competitive markets for generation, you always have a natural monopoly on the grid itself. And so you always have to have close-in attention to the decision-making on transmission investment and to tackle the often local and certainly subnational regulatory barriers in order to see the success that we all seek on renewables. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard, for these excellent comments. Excellent comments. I appreciate, and we all appreciate. I have a comment myself and a question. The question time will be limited to 5 minutes because we are out of time, fully out of time. I'm sorry I've been a very bad moderator. My comment is about China. China. You insisted on the fact that China increases its emissions of carbon despite tremendous efforts this country is doing in renewables and in nuclear, even though it takes more time in nuclear. The problem is for China, and it will be even more important for India and other countries in the emerging markets, is that the number of people is absolutely huge, and the average level of income is relatively still very much under what we experience in our industrial countries. And so the demand for energy is increasing more than the rate of growth. And so how do you answer this demand for energy? You have a problem, which all economists know, and you are economists, is that if you want to reduce the demand for coal, you have to increase the substitutes which are renewables and nuclear, mainly. Or both of them are increased in this country tremendously. It's difficult to ask them to do more. So this is why we have this still important increase in the use of coal for coal thermal plants. And you are right to say that. Probably the answer to my question is that we should encourage, even though it's extremely expensive, this very big country to invest in CCS. They are coal thermal plants, but it is difficult to. The equation is extremely complicated because of that, because they have done as much as they can in terms of a substitute to coal, so that's a big problem. My question is related to the US. I read in the Financial Times a few days ago that many states, Democrats mainly, but also Republicans, which are not in agreement with the position of your president on climate change, are coming in Europe to meet people of the European Commission in order to see to have more details about how do we create this market for carbon and what they should do at the state level in order to continue the fight against global warming. Is it true, or is this movement something which is worth to be looked at, or is it something which is negligible? This is my question, and after that we will take the other questions, please.
So I can respond to that question. I would say what is clearly true is that there are many states in the United States accounting for the lion's share of our economy, above all California itself, which I believe is the fourth largest economy in the world as a state. And these that want to act on climate change, and indeed are acting on climate change even under the difficult current national political conditions. The question of whether that involves a version of carbon pricing is more complicated. In the case of California, it does, through a cap and trade program known as AB 32, which is one important element in a multi-layered system of climate action in the state of California. But in the main, the action on climate has not taken the form of carbon pricing in the United States, even at a state-by-state level. There has been fierce resistance to that from consumers and citizens, and from the left and the right, where left politics has often argued that things like cap and trade systems are unjust because they allow pollution in communities that are adversely affected by pollution to continue through trading. And of course, the right will fight it because they often deny that climate change is a real threat and argue that dealing with it through any mechanism is too expensive to be worth the effort. So unfortunately, as of now, other than California's very real and meaningful AB 32 cap and trade system, carbon pricing per se is not a major component of even the action of the U.S. Climate Alliance states, which are the both Democrat and Republican-led states, although principally Democrat-led states that are acting very ambitiously on climate through many levers. It's just not typically, other than California, through carbon pricing. So we'll see how that evolves over time. I think as fiscal pressures become more severe in the United States, and as our politics, of which we have plenty, vary, that may well change. And I think we should all watch for that. And I think engaging with these governors and states and the U.S. Climate Alliance is absolutely worth the effort.
Thank you, Richard. So I will take a couple of questions to the floor, not to just for less than 5 minutes. Please, who wants to raise questions or comments? Please. I don't see.
Graciela has her hand up.
Graciela wants to ask.
Please go ahead. Who wants to raise a question? No one? No question?
Graciela wants, but she's muted. Speak now.
Yes,
yeah, please.
Now.
Graciela, we are glad to have Graciela
Yes.
Shishilevsky with us. She's a very good friend of the task force on carbon pricing. Graciela,
I want to respond to Rick Duke. Excellent intervention. He's pointing out that while we are all here supporting carbon pricing, the policies for carbon pricing in the United States have no support from the left and no support from the right. Is that correct, Rick?
I would not say no support. There's the shining star of California's cap and trade system, and there are some other efforts here and there that have had some traction. But I'm just noting that there are certainly challenges on both the left and the right, and the current context is very bad for carbon pricing. Yet, I would note that our politics are very fluid, and we have, plenty of democracy in the United States, as you know. And so I would predict that 3 years from now, things might look radically different, especially as fiscal pressures grow ever more severe. And so the need for some form of revenue enhancement will grow.
Okay, we go to part 2 now. Thank you very much.
I want to respond to Rick Duke.
Go ahead, but short, please, Graciela. Please go
Sorry?
ahead.
Okay, thank you. I want to say this, what you say is correct, but it's not complete in the following sense. While in the United States, as you point out, you have difficulty gathering support for pricing policies, there is very little difficulty gathering support for carbon markets of various forms. And for example, there is a huge amount of trading in carbon market that are voluntary, as well as carbon markets that are compliant. And I think what we need to do is put our efforts on the market aspect, because in the United States, there is a lot of support for markets. And compliant markets are, in that sense, the best that can be achieved, and it can be enormous. And that's what we demonstrated since the Kyoto Protocol, which is 20 years ago. The amount of trading in the carbon market is pricing policies. It's a specific form of pricing policies. And if it is compliant, then it has a different bite. And the compliant carbon markets in the United States and in the world are actually very successful and very involved. So I urge you to rethink the carbon prices in the direction of compliant carbon markets. And in that direction, given what the IPCC has demonstrated, compliant carbon markets, which are compliant carbon removal markets, which is what the IPCC requires, are what we should be focusing on. Our efforts should be there. I ask you that you put your efforts on that. I'm also working on that, and we have created a compliant carbon market structure, and this is what is needed right now, both in the US and globally. And in that case, we bypass the problem that you pointed out, which is correct, but we bypass it because in the United States, there is a lot of bias in favor of markets, even though pricing policies may be looked down to. Carbon markets are pricing policies. And if that's well understood, then it fits in what I've done for the last 20 years since the European Union emission trading system that took such a major position in that issue. We can do it. So just think of it slightly differently, okay? And thank you very much. I apologize if
you know how much I appreciate your position, which I fully share. This is the reason why I have created the task force on carbon pricing in Europe, but it could be all over the world. So you are fully right. I think that, but you have to convince. It's complicated. Anyhow, we go to part two immediately because it will be on oil and gas business, and we will have a presentation by a good friend of the task force, Julien Perez, Managing Director of OGCI. Julien, you have the floor for 10 minutes.
Okay, thanks a lot, Edmond. I'm gonna try to share my screen, and I'll keep it short, but of course, very happy to pick up any question. Thanks so much. So I think we've heard, like, during the conversation that we just had, and like the geopolitical context may give the impression that the momentum on climate is stalling, and we see it in the headlines, we see it in investor call. There's economic pressure, shifting market signal, and I think that there's a sort of a an observation that the change is not happening as fast as many have hoped or believed it was possible a few years ago. But that means that I think some energy companies have adjusted their strategies, and more voice now are calling the term of realism in the transition. And that realism, they argue, reflects the complexity of today's global energy landscape, where affordability, security, and emission reduction must all be addressed together. But I think we have to be careful here, and we should not interpret this call for realism as a retreat. Instead, let's recognize it as what it truly is, a recalibration that reflects the global realities. One side, the rising energy demand, uneven development, and political instability, but it does not wave away the scientific imperative that emission must come down, and they must come down very fast. And so that's why, despite I think this noise, it's important as well that that to demonstrate what are different energy companies doing, and this is what I'm going to focus on. So it's not. I'm going to try to bring some proof point, because sometimes it can look a little bit rhetoric, but actually it's very operational and strategic, and it's measurable. So if I just move on to the next slide, I hope that you can see my screen. So I'm part of an organization. I'm managing an organization that is called the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative, OGCI. So it's an organization that we launched at the UN Climate Summit in September 2014. So we just celebrated our 10 years anniversary. And we engaged directly 12 CEOs of the largest oil and gas companies, as you can see on the slide, and their staff on climate action, articulated around a laser-focused agenda where we can collectively reduce greenhouse gas emission, not in 30 years, but really now. And so one of the clearest area of progress where we have been focusing on is to reduce the industry own emissions, and particularly methane and flaring. And I know that this is a topic that has been mentioned several times, so it's music to my ear to listen to you just before, because this is one of the most potent and solvable problem. So together, these scope 1 and 2 emissions, and including the methane and the flaring, for the oil and gas industry, we are talking about 5 gigatons of CO2 equivalent. It's gigantic, the potential of reduction here. And if you zoom in just on methane, it's a 2 gigaton CO2 equivalent challenge. The methane emission from the oil and gas industry is 2 gigaton. It's as much as the emissions from the airlines and from the ship all over the world. It's absolutely insane, the potential of this topic. And so I'm very glad to hear that it's coming now at the forefront of the climate action. And so what you can see on the slide here is some of the progress that we've been making over the last few years by fostering the collaboration across the company. So you can see reduction in upstream carbon intensity, for instance, by 20%, the methane emission and flaring, routine flaring, by more than 50%, both in absolute and intensity, as well as the investments in low carbon tech, including renewable or energy efficiency or CCUS, which is now reaching 100 billion between 2017 and now, and only 20 billion in the year of 2023. So really a big scale up. And this has been done thanks to this collaboration platform that we've been making, but of course, each of the member companies is also driving its own strategy. So, but I think we have accelerated significantly the change within the industry. And a fun fact, just to put things in perspective, because sometimes those big numbers are a little bit difficult to grasp, but the annual absolute emission from the 12 companies of OGCI are now reduced by more than the combined total annual greenhouse gas emission from Sweden, Denmark, and Norway altogether. So the collective effort has resulted in a significant reduction in emissions. And of course, like those numbers could look sometimes a little bit suspicious. So that's why we have built up as well the OGCI reporting framework. We use a third party to verify the data that are published. And all of the KPIs are developed in a way that it's ensuring a consistent reporting. Many of our member companies are also gold standard now for GMP 2.0, and many other are on the way to be there. So we're very glad to use this framework that is a very robust framework when it comes to methane reporting, and all of them being, again, third-party verified. And in terms of projects, we have supported the emergence of multiple CCUS projects, more than 40 now around the world. So since the beginning, it has been something that we have been focusing as well our effort, and you can see the number of million tons potential they have by 2030. And one project, and I made a zoom in on methane because I know that this is a topic of interest. One project that I'm very proud of is the launch in 2021 of our satellite program. So I'm just sharing here on the screen 2 examples of how it works. So basically what we do is that we acquire satellite data on companies that are outside of the OGCI member companies, but are operating in developing economies, helping them to locate and to qualify their methane challenge. And we do that not in a name and shame exercise. We do it in a collaborative way. And this is a super important aspect, is that we pick up the phone and we ask them whether they would like to be part of this program. Then we share the data and we help them to fix the methane leakage. And then afterwards, we tell the story outside so they can get the reward and feel proud of the effort that have been made. And so what you can see on the graph here is basically data that have been acquired by our satellite data provider, GSAT. So you see on the graph where we started to see some methane plume. When do we contact the local operator? And then then the methane emission is going to zero. I mean, it's clear on the picture, like they don't detect anything. So we have two examples here, but I have many likewise that we've been using. And the potential of what we are reducing is quite significant. Here we are talking about 15 kilotons of methane annually. So you have to multiply that number by 30 to get it in CO2 equivalent. So talking about nearly 500 kilotons of CO2 equivalent that have been like slashed in months time. It's ridiculously quick and low cost. So it's a no-brainer, and this is a program that we're gonna continue. So this is what we want, is to make measurable, verifiable projects that are not happening in isolation. So now we need also to embark the others, the national company or state-owned company that are playing in country where the regulation is not yet there, or and where their government, their main shareholder or unique shareholder, is still highly reliant on the revenue of the oil and gas to stabilize their national economy. So what we did 18 months ago with UNEP and World Bank, some NGOs and the IEA, we worked together under the aegis of the COP presidency to expand the spirit of OGCI to other companies. And so the COP28 presidency, Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber, launched at COP28 what is called now the Oil and Gas Decarbonization Charter, the OGDC, which is the other organization I'm taking care of. And this has become quite quickly one of the most inclusive platforms for climate action in the energy sector. So it's a coalition that is built for complexity, it's grounded in practical action, and it's defined by shared accountability. So what OGDC is about, so it's gathering today 56 companies, which represent roughly 45% of the global oil production, operating in 120 countries. And those companies, those state-owned companies, 2/3 of them are state-owned, but all of those companies have signed up to a series of commitments, and as you can see them on the screen, reaching net zero operation by 2050, net zero emissions, Scope 1 and 2, near zero upstream methane emission by 2030, zero routine flaring by 2030, but also investing in the transition. And so you can see that we have a very diverse group, very global in different countries. And I think in the current geopolitical context, this partnership that is between North and South, East and West, public and private, and at a time where the multilateralism is facing headwind, this alone is already something that I think is worth acknowledging and celebrating. But even more important is what the signatories are doing, and they are making tangible progress toward the charter goals. Last year, we've released the first report. They are sharing the data to us, and many of those companies don't have the IP rights to share this data publicly because this is owned by their governments. But they do use OGDC as a channel to share the progress they are making, and so that we can display it into our aggregated report. So we released the one last year at COP29. We're going to release the new one at COP30 to demonstrate the progress that they are making and where they are on their journey to slash methane, slash routine flaring, and reduce their Scope 1 and 2 emissions. And so it has been built as a collaborative platform by design. We share a number of real solutions. So how to electrify operation, how to monitor methane with satellites or drones, how do you implement best practices in leak detection and repair, etc. So it's really about turning emission reduction from a cost center into a competitive advantage. And so as of today, we have built partnership with a number of expert groups like McKinsey or Carbon Limits, Standard & Poor's or Accenture. They are working with us. They are traveling the world to train the companies on site and reinforce their reporting, design margin abatement cost curve, implement project, make project finance, etc. So it's very concrete. And we have also some advanced company like Total Energies, for instance, who are stepping up to send their engineer or their solution on assets from their peer to help them in reducing emissions in Nigeria, in Angola, in Central Asia, in the Middle East. This is what's happening right now. And so we have been quite active in the last 18 months to turn this charter, this 2-page series of commitment into an organization that is really delivering actions on the ground. And we start to see some progress. So toward the COP30, as we say, I've been asking quite bluntly the CEOs, like in the current geopolitical context, what should we do? And they say, stay the course. Don't change anything. Continue to deliver the exact same action agenda as we have been doing for the last 10 years. So this is, of course, very encouraging. And so now we are focusing on helping those companies to achieve their goals. And so basically, what we want to demonstrate, which is the OGDC and OGCI, is that even in a complex capital-intensive sector, rapid climate progress is possible and is grounded in cooperation, innovation, and accountability. So to conclude and go back to the first point that I was trying to make is that I don't think that we should give into pessimism nor let realism be an excuse for inaction. Actually, for me, it's a reason to double down, to stay the course, and to deliver the energy responsibly all together. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Julien. Very, very excellent presentation. Very convincing. We'll come back with you and we'll organize this event with you of the task force on methane.
Okay.
See where we stand, and obviously you are very optimistic, and it's a very good thing because methane is very, very destructive. Now we give the floor to two firms of the sector which are very active. And the first is Total Energy, and we are very glad to have Jean-Pascal Clémençon with us. He's a Senior Vice President of Strategy and Markets at Total Energy. And I must say that he's a major support of what we are doing at the task force. Jean-Pascal, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Edmond, and good afternoon to all of you all across the world. I did not coordinate with Julien, and you will see that I want also to focus on the work that is being doing through the OGDC, which is very important. But first of all, I just want to start with a global pictures, and thanks to the IEA that is providing very accurate numbers, and that is doing a great piece of work. I just wanted to start with 2024. What has happened in 2024? The global energy demand grew by 2.2%, which is faster than the average rate over the past decade. And what is noticeable is that demand for all fuel and technology expanded in 24. Of course, the increase was led by the power sector, and the electricity surged by 4.3%, well above the 3.2% growth of the global GDP. And if you look at it, it's mostly driven by air conditioning in the global south. We've mentioned it already, renewable accounted for most of the growth in the global energy supply, 38% of that growth, but it's followed by natural gas, 28%, coal, 15%, oil, 11%, and nuclear, 8%. In this global picture, if we want to sum up the challenge of the energy transition in front of us, it's twofold in a way. It's to decarbonize the mature energy system of the developed countries. And second is to increase the energy available in the global south by fueling economic and social development with low carbon electricity rather than coal. Then in this context, what a company, a major international company like Total Energy is doing? What we're doing is staying the course of our balanced integrated multi-energy strategy by responsibly producing low-cost, low-emission hydrocarbons and developing at the same time a differentiated, profitable, integrated power model that will become one of the company's cash generation drivers. We have developed a portfolio of oil and gas projects that is very rich and to sustain a significant growth, and we are aiming to grow by 3% our oil and gas production until 2030. It's driven by gas, mostly LNG, and a significant growth in power. Currently, it's more than 5% for power. Our global energy production is growing by 4% per year through 2030. At the end of this decade, our production mix is going to be balanced, 40% oil, 40% gas, 20% electricity, mostly low carbon. And we continue, of course, to lower our emission. We need to produce oil and gas differently, and we are on the way year after year, and our business plan confirms that this objective of reducing our scope 1 and 2 by 2030 of minus 40% compared to 2015. It means reducing emission from our operation on the CO2 emission, but also on the methane emission. And as it was mentioned very efficiently by Julien, methane abatement is absolutely key. We all know that the issue of the significant heating power of methane. And as Julien mentioned, currently in the multilateralism is really facing strong headwinds, and nonetheless, international cooperation remains absolutely fundamental. And OGDC and the work through the OGDC has been absolutely instrumental. You know that what the private company are producing is important, but most of our production is being done through cooperation with national oil company. And what was really important with this OGDC is to bring on board the effort of operation emission and methane emission reduction, was to bring on board the national oil company. Today, TotalEnergies, we do have 80% of our production that is operated by others that are member of the OGDC, which is really keen to our the success of reducing our emission. Like Julien said, this OGDC success, because this initiative was co-chaired by the TotalEnergies CEO and Sultan Al Jaber at the COP28, and this is really a success because we've got almost half of the oil, global oil production represented through the OGDC, meaning that those efforts are really going to be sustained on the ground. And I think that's absolutely essential. In line with the OGDC principle, to give you an example of what TotalEnergies is doing, we are sharing our good practice, and we've made available our OSEA technology, which is a gas analyzer mounted on drones that allow you to do campaign of methane leaks detection. And we made it available to other operator signatory of the OGDC. And today we organize campaign of methane detection with Petrobras in Brazil, with SOCAR in Azerbaijan, with NNPC in Nigeria, with ONGC in India, and with Oil India as well. Therefore, it's really concrete action that we are doing on the ground to really detect, measure, and eventually abate methane emission on those assets. Therefore, this is really this international cooperation is absolutely essential. As far as TotalEnergies' portfolio is concerned, we have had already tangible results because in 2024, we have already reduced our methane emission by 55% compared to 2020 reference. And with our objective of near zero methane emission of minus 80% by 2030 is really achievable. Focusing on eliminating routing flaring, venting, and deploying permanent tracking across all our operation. The other aspect of methane that I wanted to touch upon is really the lowering the emission of the LNG chain, which is really another subject where we are deploying a lot of effort. It means reducing greenhouse gas emission from the liquefaction plant itself by using all sorts of electrification process. And our new project, Marsa LNG in Oman, is exemplary in this regard. We're going to achieve a liquefaction plant that will be emitting 3 kilos of CO2 per barrel, which is roughly a tenth of a standard liquefaction plant. This is thanks to a solar farm that will feed the power requirement of the liquefaction plant. Also, reducing methane slip from the gas engine on board the LNG carriers, which is also a strong effort on the transportation of LNG across the different ocean to really make this LNG chain more efficient. LNG, as such, is also proved as a very efficient and available technology that can help marine, which is a hard-to-abate sector, to really achieve immediately a CO2 emission reduction by around 20%, which is already a very strong achievement. Okay, it's not going to be enough to go for the full decarbonization, but it's already a step with a technology which is currently available. And if we can blend bio LNG into this feed, it will help us to achieve another step. Therefore, it's also another area of work where we are really making effort. All this is to contribute. This is to contribute to foster the role of gas as a key transition energy. Therefore, those simple examples, I wanted to convey the message that indeed, despite all the criticism, the headwinds, and the step back that we can hear around us, I think companies maintain their objectives, and the Total Energy is really pushing ahead with our course of action, and we are definitely making progress. Thank you, Edmond.
Thank you very much, Jean-Pascal. It's important. What you said, which I share fully, is that we won't make the energy transition just by saying that we will get rid of fossil fuel energy and go fully on renewables and nuclear. That's I should say stupid, because it is totally unrealistic. We need time. The energy transition is a transition, and transition on the sector which is so important in our day-to-day life, and for all the economies. We need a path, and obviously, gas is a major contributor to the energy transition. Before it disappears, probably in 20 or 30 years, gas will have disappeared. But during the period, the energy transition, we need most efforts on coal. Coal is, unfortunately, I say that because I know that for countries, it's a very big problem. I know that. And I realize, having been a politician and as such, confronted with the public opinion, that when I say that we need more efforts on coal, it's a big social problem, an economic problem, in a way. But gas is part of the solution to the transition. And you often say that. I have discussion with your CEO, Patrick Pouyanné, is insisting on that, and I fully share this position. That doesn't mean that it will remain over the years, but during the transition period, we need to, and this is what you are doing in your strategy, by the way. You explained the figures, which are very clear. Now, we were expected to have someone from ADNOC. I don't understand why the Vice President for Sustainability is not with us. So I will give 5 minutes for Q&A, no more, because we are out of time. But who wants to raise question to Julien and Jean-Pascal? Please don't hesitate. It's so important what you said about methane. You will be invited on methane, Jean-Pascal, again, because we will come back to methane in September or October. Okay, who wants to say to make a comment or to raise a question, please?
I think we have a question from Rick Duke.
Yeah, please go ahead. I did not see you.
Thank you.
The floor.
Thank you for the tremendous presentations. My question to probably mainly Julien is if you could comment on the EU oil and gas methane import standard, its viability in terms of the measurement challenges involved in implementing it, and kind of how your membership is positioning on that question. I guess relatedly, do you see prospects for the United Kingdom or South Korea under new leadership, or even Japan to echo the leadership of Europe in this regard? Thanks.
Sure. Thanks, Rick. Indeed, it's a hot topic, as you say. So maybe as a starting point, just to moderate expectation, the OGCI is not an organization that is dealing with direct regulation like in some specific country. Like we have a non-lobbying policy, but we do have an advocacy positioning, which is kind of different. But basically, we do push like general policy recommendation to the entire world, but now we don't deep dive specifically. So we have not made any sort of assessment across the 12 companies on a specific EU regulation, for instance. But what I can say is that from what I see, the EU regulation is matching quite a number of points that we have been calling for quite some time, setting targets, setting MRV, third-party verifications, transparency, all of those topics that we have been pushing for quite a long time and that all of the OGCI companies are pushing for as well. Now, I think where maybe, and that's more my personal point of view here that I'm sharing more than the OGCI perspective, what I think is could be challenging when it comes to the EU methane regulation is the tracking the molecules from the well up to the distribution point. That there's a number of tradings that is happening in between, and so it might be the parts that will be more challenging. And so I think maybe where there could be like a very interesting positioning from the EU on that front is to help the producing nations, and particularly the one that don't have any kind of methane regulation, to implement a national methane regulation and help them, for instance, to put in place the mechanics that would give the guarantee then for the EU that they are importing a gas that is currently accurately monitored and verified. So that, but again, that's more my personal view. That's it's maybe better off like supporting other regulation, national regulation, that rather than doing everything from the demand side, because it might be difficult to get implemented in the real world. But yeah, I don't know, Jean-Pascal, you may have like you could share probably eventually the total point of view, but that's what I can say at least on my side.
I think I cannot say much more. I think the complexity of the gas chain is definitely a challenge for the implementation of this policy. But indeed, if at least it could foster the development of some clear objectives in gas producing country, at least it will have achieved something positive. Yeah.
Very good. If I may, we will start immediately the part 3 on green hydrogen, because we are out of time. There are many speakers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 speakers before the concluding remarks. So I will ask each speaker to abide by the time allotted to him or her. And the first guest speaker will be Tudor Constantinescu, Principal Advisor to the Director General for Energy in the European Commission. Tudor, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Edmond. Thank you for the invitation. Very interesting discussion so far. I'm very pleased to open now this part of the event, the panel, and the discussion on hydrogen. As you know, hydrogen in the EU, it's an interesting component of the energy policy under the energy transition. I have to say it was not always like this, but at least since 2019, 2020, when we made the hydrogen strategy, this became a very important component. And let me spend just a few words to say that on hydrogen, Europe, Japan, and the US have been the countries we invested most over the last 20 years also on research and innovation technologies. But if 20 years ago the electrolyzers were just 15 kilowatts on average, now we speak about hundreds of megawatts. So the progress in scale is more than 1,000. And then with this progress in technology, also the opportunities, and the link of hydrogen was to renewable deployment and development, which was also the subject of your first panel here, became more and more important. On the other hand, of course, is also low carbon hydrogen, so which is not produced with renewable, but with low carbon electricity, with nuclear, or from fossil fuels with CCS, which can also play an important role in economy, and this is what we have acknowledged already in the hydrogen strategy as well. But since then, what I would like to underline is that we have passed through a number of pieces of legislation initiatives, more than 20 we have followed towards the Fit for 55 package and the target we have for 2030. And we acknowledge more and more the role of hydrogen in achieving by 2050 carbon neutrality. And this is important because now we move towards a path of electrification, that is clear, and we estimate that at least 50% in the final energy consumption will be electricity, electrons, compared to 25% 2-3 years ago. But still almost half of the final energy consumption will not be electrons, will be molecules. And they need to be decarbonized as well if we want to achieve the carbon neutrality in 2050. And therefore, hydrogen is so important next to biogas, to biomethane, but hydrogen, synthetic gases, synthetic fuels will be absolutely essential in heavy industries, in heavy-duty transport, in maritime applications to support decarbonization and to support the integration of renewables. This is another very important dimension which will increase more and more. And when you saw the presentation and also the tripling target we have agreed under COP, and I listened to the presentation of Paolo earlier from the IEA, hydrogen as a medium for energy storage, large-scale energy storage, will become even more important. So this is essential. All this in a context where the European Commission now, in this second von der Leyen Commission, we put more and more focus also on competitiveness. We stay on the objective of carbon neutrality. We are committed to the objectives of the Green Deal, but Clean Industrial Deal is complementing because, of course, we want to achieve this in a way which is competitive also to the European economy, and not only, also affordable for industry and citizens. Europe is one of the biggest importer of energy and therefore vulnerable to the fluctuations of fossil fuel prices, and therefore so important to build in on all the opportunities we have in terms of energy efficiency, in terms of renewables, in terms of low carbon solutions, and to have also hydrogen in the overall energy picture, both as feedstock and as an energy carrier. And this is even more important now with the Net Zero Industry Act. So we put more and more emphasis also on manufacturing, so to build the capacities which are required in this respect and to link more and more energy transition, energy policies with industrial policies, while at the same time, of course, cooperating with the rest of the world and paving the way for a global hydrogen market as well. We have developed the most comprehensive legislative framework in Europe by now and the most complete. There are only very little pieces which need to be completed, some being the low carbon delegated act, which should come in the coming weeks before August. And on the other hand, being the only area in the world, region which developed concrete binding targets for renewable hydrogen in industry, 42%, in transport, renewable fuels of non-biological origin. Then with the target we have for sustainable aviation fuels and maritime specific sectoral, plus the work on infrastructure, which is also very important, the pipelines under the Connecting Europe facility as a project of common interest, but also the work on ports, which we have been developing and even leading in the context of the Clean Energy Ministerial. We have a coalition of 60 ports which we set up in order for hydrogen to enable this global market for renewable hydrogen. But all this is important not to put our industry also in a disadvantage, but to ensure a level playing field. So the rules which we have managed to put in place in order to guarantee and to certify that hydrogen is either renewable or low carbon, these rules, we try to promote them and to make sure that they are observed also by the other countries who are willing to export hydrogen to Europe. We have developed also the dimension of hydrogen and looking into the future when will represent an important component also in the energy mix, part of the molecules. we have looked at of all the aspects which hydrogen can ensure in terms of certification to guarantee that it is for true, and though it's not renewable or low carbon to the detriment of other uses of other forms of energy. I think we think that this is something very important, and we stay committed to ensure that this is happening. Now, you'll see that over the last couple of years, we have seen very important developments. Only in 2024 compared to 2023, we have seen final investment decisions on hydrogen, which actually quadrupled. So this is important, and we had 2.5 gigawatts of electrolyzers and one added under the hydrogen bank. This being another important dimension, which is related to financing. And we have revised, so in addition to the legislation I mentioned, the state aid regime, and under this there are significant, almost 40 billion euros at EU level of support for hydrogen projects across the EU. And with the hydrogen bank, more specifically, you organized it. Now we had the second auction, and we will have by the end of the year with another billion and a third auction. So we had a lot of interesting projects, and some of them with very low premium, speaking about carbon price required in order to get to the market. This is really very important. And in industries like steel, and so we are giving now an additional push to create the lead markets, which are mentioned under the Clean Industrial Deal, and where we are working with our colleagues from DG GROW, and we consider that this dimension is very important, in particular, as I said, for steel, for fertilizers, but also in other industries where hydrogen can play an important role. So this is in a way where we are now in terms of this. We'll have the call of the hydrogen bank as a third call this year, and at the same time we'll establish an industrial decarbonization bank with 100 billion euros, together with colleagues from DG Klima, and hydrogen projects will find a source of funding among other solutions that will have to compete also with other solutions under this initiative as well. It is important to underline the fact that we put a lot of attention on collaboration also with many countries around the globe and also at the global level. So we have a number of MOUs with countries. We see corridors, in particular for the supply of hydrogen to Europe with North African countries, but also the Eastern Partnership, when the situation will allow, and in the Baltics, the Nordic one. And we plan to develop these corridors furthermore, and in addition with other parts of the world, being in Asia, being with India, being with Brazil, Argentina, and Chile, countries who are now interested, and they even started to develop projects and to adapt legislation in order to align it with the European legislation and to be able to compete on the European market for the parts which you need in terms of imports. Benefits of hydrogen are very large linked to the integration of variable power, but we know that we cannot produce it all in Europe, and we will also need imports, and therefore this dialogue with the countries is important, but it's important building partnerships and enabling them also to take advantage of this energy system integration approach, in which, of course, the most efficient way is to use directly when you can electricity, but when not in some processes or industries, you need to have the molecules, and then hydrogen can play an important role in decarbonization and be the required energy carrier in this respect. We also try to do this through a strong cooperation on research and innovation, and under which we have a partnership, a very good example at EU level with industry and with the research community, which brought a lot of success, and under which we have developed the concept of hydrogen valleys, concept which is also now furthermore developed with many other countries under the mission innovation, together also with the Clean Energy Ministerial, where together with our Dutch colleagues, we have under the lead the International Hydrogen Trade Forum, and we did on the Ports Coalition and putting them together in order to build this global market for renewable and low carbon hydrogen. There is still, of course, work to be done. There are, in some cases, some bottlenecks. We see them and we try to address them through the measures I have mentioned, at least some of them. And the dimensions that hydrogen plays and will start to play also in terms of energy security will be also an important element. So recently we had adopted, in addition to the Clean Industrial Deal and the Affordable Action Plan, also the Repower EU roadmap, so under the leadership of our Energy Commissioner, Daniel Olsen. And here it's clear that gradually hydrogen will also start to play an important role in this respect, notably, of course, when it's produced from renewables, but also low carbon hydrogen. So we have now about 250 renewable hydrogen projects in the EU, 170 in operation. The work will continue, and we will give an additional impetus to the Clean Hydrogen Alliance with industry, and make sure that all these stakeholders then are grouped together in the phase of research, but also in the phase of development, and when the important projects of common European interest are developed at European level. I would stop here, but of course, if a question or a need, I can definitely try to contribute further. Thank you very much again for the opportunity.
For this session of the policy of the European Commission on the green hydrogen. I give the floor to Noé van Hulst, who is the special hydrogen advisor to the International Energy Agency. Noé, you please try to remain on your 10 minutes.
Yes. Thank you so much, Edmond. I will be trying to be really short. I have a couple of slides that I want to try and find if I can. Let me see whether I can find them.
We can help if needed.
Yeah, please. Can you? Because I'm having some technical difficulties. I apologize. But Edmond, I will go very quickly. I will try to give you a very quick overview of the global situation in hydrogen from my perspective. Next slide, please. This one. So as Tudor, my good friend and colleague Tudor Constantinescu, already from the European Commission, has explained, the way to look at hydrogen, and it's not only green hydrogen or renewable hydrogen, but also indeed hydrogen, which in other ways, can be produced low emission. It's not the silver bullet for problems, and it's also not a total hype. It is in between. I think the way to see it, it's neither hype nor the hope. It's really a complementary role, the missing link in the energy transition in terms of where we need to decarbonize also the molecules. You need clean molecules also in energy, in any energy system. Electricity alone will not be able to do the job. There are sectors which are hard to electrify. It has already been mentioned, chemicals, including refineries, steel industry, heavy-duty transportation, including long-distance trucks, but also ships, planes, and long-term energy storage. Those are the main areas. Cannot be done only by electricity. But there is another important element that I want to stress very much in the context also of the changing geopolitics, Edmond and dear colleagues. That is that, yes, the whole kind of new impetus for hydrogen and low emission hydrogen has very much been from the climate policy perspective. But increasingly, we can see around the world that there are other drivers coming in which push hydrogen to the forefront of policies. If you look at a country like India or also China, it is also energy security. It is also industrial policy, and even hasn't been much mentioned today yet, but we see, of course, a rise in defense expenditures around the world. And for defense and becoming more autonomous in defense, also low emission hydrogen is going to play a role. There's not much talk about it yet, but you will see this coming out more and more. Where will we end up with hydrogen? Nobody really knows. Will it be 10% of the energy mix or 20%? Nobody really, or something in between. Nobody knows. And it doesn't matter. It's going to be big in any case, and we need a lot to happen before we can make it as big as this, percentages of the energy mix. Next slide, please. Can we get the mine? Yes, please. So I like this slide very much because, there was a peak of inflated expectations a couple of years ago. Everybody thought hydrogen is going to be so fast and so quick and everything is going to be hydrogen. No, that's not the case. We went down in terms of kind of disillusionment, maybe too unrealistic expectations, etc. And now we are actually already past that and becoming more realistic. Which are the projects that can really happen, that really make sense? And this is happening more and more. And I'm echoing what many have said already today. Next slide, please. So we are beyond that. And you see that how? This is how I underpin it. Number one, the global public funding for clean hydrogen is increasing around the world still. Despite all of that, in many, many countries, not only IEA countries, but also in emerging economies, more and more policies, more and more public funding put towards clean hydrogen. And again, not only because of climate, but also because of industrial policy, energy security, etc. Next slide, please. You have to click a lot of times. This is a complicated slide to get it complete. And I echo what others have said. So despite that fact that, you see, projects have been canceled, whatever, actually, if you look at the real numbers, and IEA is doing that, the investment decisions last year have been double the year before. And my prediction is that we will see next year even more investment decisions compared to 2024. And if you look globally, ladies and gentlemen, again, you will see that China actually is more or less has half of those final investment decisions. Most of the hydrogen projects that are being built, or half of them are being built currently in China. Asia is going very fast. The Middle East is going very fast. Even the Americas, including Latin America, is ramping up. And Europe has a lot of policies, as explained by Tudor, but in terms of the final investment decision is unfortunately still lagging behind a little bit. Next slide, please. Yeah, you can go on. So, and please click on. The good news is also that if you look at if you look at all of this from the IEA perspective, from a global perspective, again, it is the potential around the world. So many countries have huge resources in terms of renewable hydrogen, very cheap, solar, wind around the world. So they will become players. This will change also the geopolitics. And the good news is also that IEA is still predicting that if we scale up, if we manage to make this bigger, and you should see hydrogen is more or less where solar and wind were 15 years ago. It is starting to ramp up. The prices will come down, the cost will come down, and in the best locations, it can become really relatively cheap. Next slide, please. Let me give you the best news, in my view, of last year in terms of things that are really happening in green hydrogen in Europe. That is this one, the purchase agreement, long-term purchase agreement between RWE and Total Energies in Germany, where Total is greening their refineries with green hydrogen, which is produced by RWE. Pipeline is being built. That is a long-term agreement, which we would like to see much, much more of in Europe. And that can really help the ramping up. So real stuff is happening. Last slide, please. So what more is needed around the world? Yes, Edmond, I completely agree with all of you that proper carbon pricing can help a lot and is needed to help shrink the cost gap with the fossil fuel alternatives for where hydrogen can be applied. That helps a lot to lower the cost gap. But it will not be sufficient at this moment because we are in that phase of ramping up. Bold policies will be needed, particularly also in demand creation, rightly stressed also by Tudor, previous speaker, the EU targets where you say, you need so much of greening in maritime, in aviation, in industry. That will definitely help. Much stronger public procurement is still underrated instrument. And yes, we will still need temporary supply subsidies like we did in solar and wind 15 years ago. To a larger scale. And actually the ETS revenues can also partly be used to finance that. And I agree with also the speaker from Iberdrola earlier that infrastructure will also be very key to link the supply and the demand, because the supply sources and the demand centers are not always in the same place in hydrogen. So you will need pipelines, you will need terminals, you will need underground storage. And of course, obviously, continuing to improve with innovation and R&D will be needed. I hope I stayed within my 10 minutes, Edmond, but this is my overview from where we are. A relatively positive message, I would say. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Noé. That's a very, very good synthesis of the problem. And thank you for focusing on the price of carbon, which is not the silver bullet, obvious. But it is not a silver bullet, but without carbon pricing, sectors like green hydrogen, and in general, we won't succeed. I think that carbon pricing is indispensable to the energy transition, but yes, it is not enough. That's obvious. It's not enough. It has to be complemented by many. Okay, thank you very much, Noé. Now I give the floor to two speakers for firms. 3D, Thor Ebertson, Head of Hydrogen Strategy and Partnership at Quer International, Chairman of Quer Iceland, and founder and Chairman of Taurus. 3D, an old friend of mine, you have the floor.
Thank you, Edmond, and thank you very much for inviting me. So first of all, if I give a small introduction on CARE, that is the company I'm working for. CARE is traditionally an IPP. It's around 25 years old company. We're operating in 25 countries, around 2 gigawatts of renewables. That is wind, solar, and waste to energy. A few years ago, we decided to enter the green molecule race, if we could say that. And we are developing green hydrogen projects in 3 countries at the moment. In France, where our electrolyzer will be commissioned this autumn. That is the biggest green hydrogen electrolyzer in France, and it will be commissioned like November, something like that. And the hydrogen from that electrolyzer will be used for mobility mainly in Occitania and in southern France. The second most advanced project we are developing is in Iceland. That is an 840 megawatt project. That is a very, very large project and a very, very expensive project. We are well advanced with the first phase, which is 240 megawatts. The third country is Brazil. We are developing a 2.4 gigawatt electrolyzer in Brazil. So the question is, in countries like Iceland, developing such a big hydrogen project. It's obvious that the country can't use but a small part of it. What are we going to do with the hydrogen? So actually, this project is an ammonia project, and we plan to export the ammonia to Europe, and where it will be used for various uses. So consequently, we had to try to figure out where is the market for the ammonia, practically the carrier for the hydrogen. And we think that the lowest hanging fruit at the moment is the maritime sector. That requires relatively little infrastructure. It is a very well-known carrier, and it is easy to retrofit LNG ships to go from LNG to ammonia, and that seems to be the way to go. Also, heavy trucking, that is an avenue that we want to explore. But if you think about the willingness to pay, the obvious way to use ammonia would be for the fertilizer sector, but the willingness to pay is only half of the leverage cost of hydrogen. So we're not there yet, which brings me to the fact that it is notoriously difficult to develop green hydrogen because of the intermittency of the renewables, and very expensive. A plant, for example, like we're developing in Iceland, 280 megawatts, it costs around 1 billion euros. So it is obvious that it needs to be supported. And there are two ways to support it within the current system in Europe. That is for the investment or CapEx grants. And the Innovation Fund is a very good source of grants for CapEx grants. Then we could call it operational grants or subsidies for the hydrogen, and the European Hydrogen Bank has been designed to do that. And we have already had auctions in the European Hydrogen Bank, and it was extremely disappointing for us, the developers, because the subsidies are so low. It's only like 50 cents, and that goes nowhere against the cost that we're faced with. So, but the CapEx grants that from the Innovation Fund, they are sizable and help us. Coming back to the European Hydrogen Bank, one of the things that you are required to do, you're not allowed to use more than 25% Chinese technology. So what the European Commission has done, it's trying to ring fence the electrolyzer industry in Europe by banning practically banning banning Chinese technology, which is cost only about 1/3 of what it does in Europe. This is extremely bad for developing hydrogen projects, because electrolyzers are the most expensive component in a plant, like in a hydrogen plant. And this will only prolong the uptake of hydrogen in Europe. Europe, it is understandable that the Commission is trying to protect European industries, but they lost on the solar panels, they lost on the batteries, they will lose on the electrolyzers. So the only thing this does is it prolongs the development of the electrolyzers or of hydrogen in Europe. When we look to China, China is on the forefront of the hydrogen revolution, we could say, both in terms of derivatives, but also in terms of pure hydrogen. And if I'm correct, my colleague Frank Yu will tell us about his plant that they are commissioning now in Xifeng in Mongolia and Japan, an ammonia plant, a very, very interesting plant. We don't have any plants in Europe. We only have small electrolyzers that are used for industry, and most of them are pilot projects and experimental. The reason is that on mainland Europe, that is in France, Germany, and those places, electricity is too expensive to produce hydrogen. Land is too scarce, and water is too scarce to be able to support mega projects. But up in the north, up in the far north, like Norway, Sweden, Finland, and in the south, like in Spain and Portugal, that is where you will see the production of hydrogen. But having said that, I'm optimistic about the development, especially if we look at the low-hanging fruit first, that is the maritime sector and heavy trucking. Fantasies about cheap energy cheap hydrogen being produced in Northern Africa and in faraway places, we should not think too much about that, because it is impossible to finance projects in Northern Africa. Projects like this, which are practically experimental projects. So I think on this note, I'll say thank you, and thank you, Edmond, and the audience. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Trygve, for this realistic presentation, which shows that you don't like the issues to overcome. Okay, now the second speaker for firms is Chinese. Yu Frank, Global Vice President of Envision Energy. You have the floor, Yu.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Trygve, my best friend in the world, in Iceland, mentioning us. Yeah, so right now it's almost midnight in China, but I insist, stay here. Want to share some insight about green hydrogen, green ammonia with you, very short. Envision is a wind turbine company set up 17 years ago. But right now, we are transforming ourselves from a wind turbine manufacturing to a new era green hydrogen company in the world. The site, the picture you are seeing on the screen is a real picture, not a fake picture. Okay. We have 500 megawatt electrolysis, 100% off-grid powered by wind power in Inner Mongolia to produce green ammonia right now. Okay, so this plant is being commissioned right now. Will supply the green ammonia in Q4 of this year. Okay, this plant is 100% off-grid. And this is the largest commercialized green ammonia project in the world right now. It's all of the pocket money from Envision Energy, 100% private sector, no any government support, no any government subsidy from China. Okay, so I want to share some insight from my past experience to develop this project in the world. First, the subsidy will kill the business, because if you get subsidy, the industry the private sector lacked innovation. They lacked a driving force to drive the cost down. So sometimes the subsidy killed the business. In China, no any subsidy. We build this project by ourselves, out of pocket money. No any subsidy, first thing. The second thing is, we believe right now, our cost of ammonia from China base, $1.5 per kg. From the other country, if we duplicate this design to the other country, likely $2 per kg. So this design, this model with 300,000 tons per year green ammonia capability a year, 100% off-grid powered by the renewable, we believe in most of country, $2 per kg. Okay. The second thing, the third thing is, I want to share with you, we should be very careful about the blue ammonia. The blue ammonia is much more competitive than the green right now because of the price of the natural gas. Right now in the world, no matter what kind of fossil energy, coal in China is very cheap. Natural gas from US is very cheap. Natural gas from Australia is also cheap. Natural gas from the Middle East is also very cheap. So somebody try to develop the so-called clean ammonia will muddy water for the renewable powered ammonia. Nobody can tell the blue ammonia what's the real carbon intensity in the blue ammonia. We are afraid of this kind of the so-called clean ammonia from the fossil energy without clear understanding about the full value chain from the upstream natural gas production and drill out, and also distribution of natural gas will damage the whole green hydrogen market. This is something we should be very careful. This may be some good game by the oil gas company based on the fossil energy. The only solution for the green hydrogen is the renewable power-based green hydrogen. So this side is 100% off-grid. Okay, in the beginning, we're still thinking about the grid. In China, grid is very strong. You can see that around this facility, you can see a lot of lighting. That means it's grid support very strong. But we give up this. We go to 100% off-grid. Why? Because we think in the future, this kind of problem can be replicated to the other country, like Namibia, like Australia, like Australia, like Iceland, some location without grid support. So the final thing I want to share about this related with green hydrogen market, try to give you, he think the maritime is a big market. I totally agree with that. But our understanding in the maritime is the methanol is dead. No matter what kind of situation, methanol is dead. You know why? Because the biomethanol is cheap. But during production of the biomethanol, the CO2 is emitted to the air. But when you go to the e-methanol, capture the biogenic CO2 with green hydrogen. Because the green hydrogen to produce the e-methanol compared with probably e-ammonia is same. No doubt, the e-methanol will be much more expensive than the green ammonia. So in the bunkering side, in the maritime side, we believe the green ammonia will be the winner, no doubt. The methanol dead, the methanol dead. So right now in the global market, we have to say IMO do a good example, but we hope the IMO will get the practice approved in October this year. This is very important because this is the first mandatory, non-voluntary CO2 reduction decarbonizing program in the world. We have to support IMO to insist on this. If IMO did not get this approved, it will be a bad, very bad example in the world. We are selling the green ammonia right now. I also have to share with you, I'm very disappointed with the chemical sector in the world, oil gas sector in the world. They claim they want to decarbonization, but when I sell the green ammonia to them, they don't want to pay the premium. Why? Because when we talk about the pricing of the green hydrogen, why the consumer don't want to pay the premium? Because the policy is not there. They still can make their production with a lot of the carbon emission. They don't want to pay a little bit premium on the green hydrogen. In the chemical sector, in the mobility market, in the petroleum market, the transformation is too slow. I'm quite disappointed. So right now, I have to say, Korea government and the Japanese government, they made good example. They introduced the green ammonia or clean ammonia, no matter what the carbon emission, but at least they introduce the low emission ammonia into the power sector. That's the hope. So I really want to, the industry in Europe and in the outer world, think about how to keep the momentum of decarbonization without any compromise. Okay, finally, we welcome all of you see this site. We will hold the first Green Hydrogen Summit in this site in sometime in this year. We will invite all of our partners in the energy sector, in the mobility sector, in the banking sector to visit this site to see how to break into the decarbonization industry through the competitive molecules in the world. So I share a small video to you about this site. Okay, thank you very much for your participating to this seminar. I really hope we can work together to drive the decarbonization of the industry. We cannot lose our momentum in the industry.
Very good, very good.
Thank you very much.
Very good, Frank. Next time I go to China, I would like to visit you because you don't like ambition. And I think that it is the only thing that is absolutely necessary if we want to succeed in the energy transition. Ambition. And the responsibility of public authorities is to create the environment that reduce the risk of taken by people like you that are extremely ambitious. I am among those who are very proud of the people that take risk, the entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are extremely important in the world where we are living. And we need more and more entrepreneurs in the energy sector, in the transition that we are living today. And you are among them. I wish you good luck. And I would like to see you in China and see what you are doing, your project and so on, because it's extremely interesting to promote green ammonia. Okay, thank you very much. It was a very
thank you. Welcome to visit us. Welcome to visit us.
I will visit you. Don't worry. I will come rather often in your country. And
our dream is to get green hydrogen to compete with the green hydrogen, conventional hydrogen in China. No doubt. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, last but certainly not least, I will give the floor to an investor, a financial investor, Nicolas Pio, who is a very good, who participates to most of our events. It's very active. And so, Nicolas, you have the floor. Nicolas is a founding partner and CEO of Tilt Capital and a member of CIPAREX Executive Committee. Nicolas, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Edmond. Hi, everyone. I'm going to keep it short because I think a lot has been said. And actually, part of what I wanted to say was already discussed. So I'm going to focus on two things regarding the hydrogen economy that I see as an investor and react on actually what has been said by the last two speakers. First, today, hydrogen is a big boys business. And I think we need to understand that to develop a hydrogen economy, we actually need for the little ones to be able to use that hydrogen on a competitive basis. And so my first point is to say logistics and contractual framework prevent the spread of hydrogen. It's true in the US, it's true in Europe. I don't know how it is in China, but it's certainly true in the US and in Europe. Why is that? It's because today the most of the hydrogen that is available is actually held by an oligopoly. And to illustrate that, I can tell you that on one of our companies that is actually a hydrogen buyer, they are being offered prices of hydrogen for small amounts of hydrogen. They are basically doing electro hydrogen gensets. They're being offered hydrogen sometimes at 50 euro a kilo delivered on site. This is obviously uncompetitive because their goal is to substitute diesel. So if you add the high capex cost, which is normal because we're at the beginning, and you add the fact that compared to a large refinery that would get probably its hydrogen around 4 to 6 euro per kilo, if you get 30 or 50 euro per kilo delivered on site, this is actually a killer for the business model. And I think here we need to really reflect on this, on the way that SMEs are actually being left out of what could be a revolution and what today is not. The second point, and this will not surprise you, Edmond. The second point is, of course, the cost of carbon. The price of carbon is today not high enough to substitute fossil fuels basically in general with hydrogen on certain application. Very concrete example again. Today, diesel gensets represent, it's not that easy to assess, but it's basically 400 to 600 million tons per year of CO2 emissions. You could add a lot of emissions on thin particles, you could add SOx, NOx, etc. This is particularly a problem when you're doing works in cities. You know, you have a diesel genset, you're performing works, and so you have a lot of emissions plus noise plus everything. We have a solution through hydrogen generators. However, today, when we, for example, entered this company, the break-even, because of the price of gas, the price of diesel, etc., the break-even was around $60 to $70 a ton, euro ton of CO2. Today, the break-even is at 100, although we've reduced by 40% the capex, because prices of diesel have gone down. And of course, we see that the price of carbon is very far from those levels. So no surprise here. I think the cost of carbon is a key element. But if you allow, I will react to the last two speakers. And I think I will. I'm sorry. I will take a very contrarian view also to what Philippe Varin said. Of course, we can say, we need to bring the cost of technology down and irrespective of where it comes from. I don't buy that. And I can tell you that this is not what I see daily in how I invest. The reason being, first, I disagree that, and I have been working, of course, and Edmond, you know this, a lot with Chinese partners and Chinese friends when I was with Engie, and I still have contacts there. But I disagree with the fact that this is unsubsidized. In power electronics, it has been heavily subsidized. In solar panels, it has been heavily subsidized. And basically, most of these companies, had they been under, I would say, normal regimes, market regimes, they would have gone under a long time ago. None of the Chinese power panel producers are actually cash generating. So I think we need to be very careful in what we say, because it is very difficult to say that we're going to lead the energy transition and forget that energy policy is based on a trilemma. It's energy security, affordability, and sustainability. And I don't think that energy security can actually be met in terms of objectives without the adequate level of diversification and without the adequate level of local ability to be a player in key technologies. Because if you're not a key player, then you are absolutely dependent on external, even if there's massive diversification possible, you are dependent on exterior factors. And so I do think, and I see it in most of my investments, there is an issue here, and it's true in the hydrogen space, that we do need to create a robust technological and industrial value chain in Europe. Once again, stability of the policy framework is critical. Carbon pricing is also critical because we need to look at it on an LCA basis. And of course, the cost of energy is key. And we have been advocating also with the European institutions to look at different ways to consider the state aids and how we could come up with lower prices of electricity for strategic projects. But I certainly do not think that we can replicate the mistake we've done in the chip industry, for example, and say the cost is much lower elsewhere, and that's not a problem, we'll import. We know that this is actually a weakness when we look at it from a strategic perspective. And I think even from a collaborative perspective, especially with China, it will be all the better if both sides have, I would say, an ability to contribute to the energy transition on an industrial basis and not have an unbalanced relationship. And I'll stop there in the interest of time also.
Very good. It's important what you said, Nicolas, because it raises a question that everybody has in mind in Europe, by the way, and it's one part of the issue, the one part important part. So we have a few minutes for Q&A. Who wants to, let us say, 10 minutes before I give the floor to our friend Derwood? 10 minutes. Who wants to start to speak? Because it has been extremely rich. I learned a lot. I must say that every day I see more issues, more questions which are unsolved for this very complicated problem of the energy transition. So who wants to speak? Who wants to raise the first question? Please, don't hesitate. We have 10 minutes. No one? Please? Please, don't be shy. Don't be shy.
I think we wore people out.
Don't be shy.
I think Franz just lifted his hand.
Yeah.
Franz.
One question. Isn't it a problem that we in Europe, we mostly rely on carbon pricing, whereas China and until recently the US with the Inflation Reduction Act and others have done industrial policy subsidizing their industries. So you have a problem with competitiveness. And this was a problem, for example, 10 years ago, Europe had around 80% of solar panel production, mostly in Germany, but also in Austria. But now this has, because of very successful Chinese industrial policy, this has all shifted more or less to China.
Yeah, the answer, I will take the question for myself. The answer is CBAM, Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism.
Yeah.
You know it. It's a complicated mechanism. It has not been implemented for this objective, which is reduce the problem of competitiveness. We already had in the previous events organized by the task force, the Director General of Energy, who is a friend of mine, Gerasimos Thomas, and he explained that we don't want to give a lesson to the rest of the world. We just want to solve an internal problem in the European Union, which is the fact that we will have to make all the firms concerned by the carbon market, included steel, included electricity, or at least electricity of the neighbors, included aluminium, to be in the situation to pay for actually they don't pay. They are included in the perimeter of the market of carbon, but they are excluded from paying the price of carbon. And obviously, it is a big problem, a very serious problem. And then why the European Union created this CBAM? Just to lead these firms in Europe to pay what they have to pay, but to create the same situation for their competitors outside the European Union. The steel producers or aluminum producers outside European Union will have to pay the same price. Obviously, the reading I have from CBAM, and we had this explanation in many countries outside Europe and in China, especially, is that in fact it could be the beginning of a global price of carbon. And I think that more and more people understand that. Because obviously, if you enter into Europe and the firms in your sector have to pay price of carbon, it's not. And if you have a price of carbon of the same level in your country, then you enter free of because you pay in your country the price of carbon, and the competition is fair. And I think that it is a good incentive to find, at least for part of disequilibrium in the competition. It's not enough, I agree, but it would be a major step if we went in this direction in all over the world. Why? First, because it will create a level playing field in the world for competition through carbon markets developed all around the world, and for the energy transition, it would be obviously something very useful. But secondly, it would create resources, important resources, that we could use to help to the energy transition in emerging countries, which are at the heart of the issue for tomorrow. Why? Because the demand for energy is increasing while it is decreasing, for example, or it is under control in Europe, less in the US, but under control. It is much more difficult to control the demand for energy in India because the demand there is extremely important. And therefore, with CBAM and the resources of CBAM, which would be enlarged to the rest of the world, that would give an extraordinary amount of reserve of resources that could be used to help these countries to fund their energy transition mainly in clean energy. I think that plan for the time being is realistic. I completely agree that of the lack of realism of this plan today, but we'll see. I think if CBAM is adopted, if people realize that we need a level playing, that we need resources to fund the energy demand in countries which are most in need of them, and it would be justice because these countries tell us, and they repeat it, that they are not responsible for most of the carbon in the atmosphere. So I think that we have to develop this idea very carefully because it makes a lot of sense that we pay for the emissions of carbon, and the resources help the funding of the green transition of emerging countries. This is my answer. I don't answer all the point raised by Nicolas, which is the fact that you have other factors which need to be introduced in order to have a full fair competition. But if we found a way, and hopefully we will do it in January 2026 in Europe by the introduction of CBAM, it will be the first step. I think that it can be a very important first step in the direction of direction of a fair energy transition. Paolo, you have a question, please, Paolo.
Thank you very much. It's a comment and a question. At the IEA, half joking, when we speak about hydrogen and the right fuels, we say there are three priorities: demand, demand, demand. So my questions to all the speakers, what kind of policies could be used to foster this demand? And the other comment, when I hear about the competitiveness, I'm sorry to say, this is the wrong question. At very low shares, nobody pretends that these new technologies are competitive. Nobody pretended that solar PV 20 years ago was competitive. What you really want is two things: to create scale with a predictable volume so that the enterprises have a perspective, and you want to control total cost, which means making sure that there are economies of scale and cost reductions. And the second point is that if the cost premium of the fuel is very high, it does not mean that the intermediate product, let's say green steel, the premium cost is much lower. And in the final product, like a car of high price, it's 1%. So what kind of policies could we use to create this demand and control total cost? I'm sure Noé has an opinion, but my question is to everybody, actually. Thank you.
Can I maybe comment a little bit on this? I think we're discussing this as hydrogen production is like a mature industry. This is an infant industry. It's being conceived at the moment. And to be able to start infant industries, normally that is done through subsidies and support that will go away in time when the fuel starts to become competitive. And the competitive, like Franz was partly suggesting and Edmond, is that the relative prices of hydrogen and its derivative to fossil fuels, the price of carbon will very much determine that. The higher the price of carbon, the more competitive those derivatives will be. So I think, but my main point is that these are infant industries. We can't talk about it like it's fully developed.
Thank you, Trygve. Someone else wants to answer to?
I'm happy to take that, Edmond. First of all, I completely agree with what the previous speaker said about infant industry. I think we are not taking that into account enough in Europe. We are regulating the hydrogen market as if it is a mature market, and not enough is done to help grow the market. So demand, demand, demand. I agree with Paulo, of course, and he knows that. But I think several things can be done much more forcefully. Let me start with my favorite, public procurement. Public procurement is a very much underrated policy. So, I mean, governments are building infrastructure, are making contracts day in, day out, ordering, infrastructure, construction. Why not have a certain percentage of that at least being green? I mean, you are advocating all the time, Edmond, rightly, carbon pricing, but every single day, the governments at all levels, central governments, municipalities, etc., are signing contracts which do not take into account any carbon price.
Exactly.
They are ordering construction with a zero carbon price, not even a shadow price. They are just simply doing a contract which is the lowest cost, whatever the carbon emissions are in the construction of any public building, etc. That should stop. That should stop immediately, but it's not stopping. So that is my number one, and this apparently is already, public procurement is already, for cement, for steel, a very important driver of demand. And then, of course, yeah, in private markets, also a lot more can be done. The EU is doing good stuff in terms of, having mandate for, so much clean fuel in shipping, in aviation. That is going to be helping to drive. Of course, it needs to be then effectively implemented, which is always a challenge in the EU. And this can be replicated much more. Why am I not able, if I want to buy a car, to say, I want a car produced from green steel? I cannot do it. It's not possible. So we need to create those markets that also automobile manufacturers are kind of feeling the pressure from the consumers that they need to buy that green steel. And as Paulo already mentioned, it's only 1-2% extra price for my car. Why would I not be able to buy that? These are just a couple of examples, but much, much more can be done, and we should be doing that. Thank you.
You're very good, Noé. I fully share your point. Who wants to participate to the discussion, which is really very interesting? Before I give the floor to Dawood, who wants to speak? Please don't hesitate.
Yeah, if you make this nice invitation, I will say 2 words, because it was referred a couple of times to the EU, and indeed we see, and carbon price is important, but we know that unfortunately the carbon price is low, and it's also difficult to get to a global level which to be agreed and to create a level playing field, not to create a strong disadvantage to the EU. Therefore, we have, as you have mentioned very well, the CBAM, and we'll try now even to simplify the CBAM for the next year when it starts really fully operating, and also to have for certain products maybe a small amount which can be exempted. However, what we try is to create this demand, and this demand creation perhaps is indeed, we know that hydrogen is mainly used in fertilizers and in refineries. But if you look at the impact of renewable hydrogen now in fertilizers, it will be very high. If you look at the impact of the price in the final product, which is bread, is very limited. The same as in the example of Franco with cars, 1%, 2%. So this is perhaps a way to try it. At the same time, we need to try to do this not alone in a region, we try to do this also at global level, and we try to launch this type of campaign at global level for renewable and low carbon hydrogen or low emissions hydrogen, and under the Clean Energy Ministerial start, and to try in this way to move a little bit more the market. But of course, carbon price will have an important role to play into this whole discussion. However, when it comes to affordability, I think gradually the economic analysis will have to grow in scope, because it's clear that it will be more expensive to have hydrogen, for example, in certain industries. However, if you take into account all the other benefits, the industries which are created, the jobs which are created, the value added in the society which is created, and start to put all these things in balance and move to another economic level, then the perspective can start to be different. And I think the difficulty is to get more to that level, because at a certain moment, this will be substitutes and new solutions and technologies which will be employed in the economy, in an economy which will have to be low carbon or even decarbonized, as we aim for.
Thank you, Tudor. Let me, before giving the floor to Dawood, intervene on the raison d'être of this task force. The result that this task force was that when I created it, the price of carbon was very low. You remember that? It was in, I think, 2018 or 2019. The price of carbon was about 4 or 5 euro and even less. Very low, very low. And I fought, saying that we need a significant price of carbon. But what was more important even, or as important, as the level of the price of carbon was that it becomes a true signal in the long run for investments. And that is extremely important. The price, the signal for investors of the price of carbon is extremely important. And you are right when you say that for firms, at least for public procurement, it's important that you at the European Commission, you should force all the firms to have a shadow price of carbon. And there are some firms like Total Energy that have a shadow carbon. The first time I met on this issue the boss of Total Energy, Patrick Pouyanné, he told me we have a shadow price of carbon of 100 euro per ton in all our investments. And I told him that is extremely, extremely intelligent. And I think that I repeat that every time I have a discussion with the European Commission, but I know that I insist, even though I know that there are obstacles to that, and I know that you don't want to be criticized, to get involved in manipulating the price of carbon, which no one can imagine, and you can take all the precautions to avoid that risk. But anyhow, I think that an excellent signal for green hydrogen would be not to raise the price of carbon to 100 euro per ton today. No, just say, and it does not anything, that you cannot imagine that the price of carbon can be under 1 euro per ton in 2030. That could be, since you have the control of the supply of permit emissions, you have an immense credibility in saying that. And that would be extraordinarily useful in sectors like green hydrogen, but also in other sectors. Because the price of carbon is not important only because it's a cost, but it's important because it is a signal, and that gives the direction, and that you should introduce that. Thus, it is not difficult to introduce it. But I have had a discussion with Gerasimos so many times on this, and I know that it's complicated. I'm convinced I was not alone that you had to raise the price of carbon. Today, okay, it's okay, but it could be it's okay. I don't think that you can introducing CBAM to have a price of carbon. It's too high, so it's okay for me. But the fact that you miss the opportunity to say the price of carbon in 2030 won't be lower than 100 euro per ton, which would be a significant signal for a sector like hydrogen and for many other things. Okay, now I give the floor for the concluding remarks to my friend Derwood. Please, Derwood.
Thank you, Edmond. This has been fantastic listening to everybody today. We're in a horse race. So we've got, on the one hand, an accelerating climate problem where we're unmasking warming. We've got emissions going up, and we have 28 self-amplifying feedbacks that are pushing us faster and faster. That's one of the horses in this race. The other one we spend most of today talking about is the effort to decarbonize, and the optimism from so many of the speakers about where we are and where we can be quickly in decarbonization is exciting. It gives all of us energy to continue our work, but we have to recognize that decarbonizing the energy system, even when we do it, is a marathon that only turns down warming about 1/10 of a degree at 2050. That's a very modest amount, not enough to keep us from going over the cliff with the tipping points. Now, decarbonization kicks in big time starting in 2060. That's going to be too late if we don't have another strategy for slowing down warming in the near term. Fortunately, we do have that strategy, and that's the strategy of cutting methane and the other super climate pollutants, the fluorinated gases, the tropospheric ozone, and black carbon soot. When we cut that package of climate pollutants, we can avoid at least 4 times more warming than decarbonization alone in 2050. This is a sprint that we need to win to stay in the race of the marathon to 2050 and beyond as we decarbonize. And we talked a lot about methane today. I was very glad to hear the discussions about OGMP and the oil and gas decarbonization charter. 56 companies, including 33 national oil companies, pledging, promising they're going to reduce their emissions to near zero, and they're going to stop routine flaring by 2030. So it's an ambitious and fast timeline, but building on the success of OGMP and those 12 companies we heard about. But at this point, this late date, when tipping points are so close, it's not safe enough just to rely on pledges and promises. And we do need to lock in with mandatory measures, as the European Commission and the European Parliament have suggested for many years, a binding methane agreement. And now that the Europeans have the European methane regulation, that would be the fulcrum. And if we thought of how to use that, multilateralize it, and connect basically the same standards with the 56 oil companies and representing 47% of the suppliers. And then Europe with their rig, they're the biggest buyer of natural gas. You can see how close we are to putting together an agreement. If we were to succeed with that, and I do believe we will be able to buy the time that we need to finish decarbonizing the energy system with all the brilliant technologies we talked about today and many, many more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dawood. I remind you that the next event we will organize will be on methane. And I know, Dawood, that you are very much involved and you have strong ideas coming from the fact that you are very, you admire very much what has been done for the ozone layer in Montreal Protocol. And so I think that I will propose you to organize this event with you, with your institution. And I will propose our Chinese, I don't know if they are still there, because in China it is nearly midnight. So probably, but if some of them are there, you will receive an invitation to participate to this event on methane. It's, in my view, it's very important. There are progress which have been made by firms, as appeared today, and we will listen to them. We'll see what they have done, what they expect to do, and what if we can do more, and where we are going in this field. And I think that it will be a very good opportunity, this event, to exchange views with the oil and gas sector. Thank you very much, all of you. It was a great event. Really, I learned a lot. And there was a diversity of opinions, very rich, very thoughtful. And I thank you, all of you. It was great. And I'm sure that you will come back for our future events. And have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye, Edmond. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for the International Energy Agency.